After defeating the Demon King on Earth with his disciples, Min Si-woo, South Korea's foremost hunter, was inexplicably transported to a realm inhabited by monsters nearly a century ago. He can only return to Earth by defeating a dragon-like creature that possesses a core within its body. This core could assist him in teleporting back to his native planet. Si-woo eventually defeats the monster after years of battle, a feat he can attribute to his legendary healing abilities, and he takes the core for himself. Upon swallowing the stone, he is prepared to return to Earth and reunite with his little brother and disciples. The following instant, he awakens in a verdant forest. He did not return alone. There is an enigmatic entity residing within his innards, and its name is Frey. He regains his balance and takes a look around, but he is initially unable to identify the location, which of course catches Frey off guard. I mean, how is it possible for this individual to fail to distinguish his own residence? That is simply peculiar. However, Si-woo serves as a reminder to his companion that the landscapes of Earth are contingent upon their location. As he concentrates on the flow of prana in his vicinity, he experiences a sensation that is suspiciously reminiscent of being enclosed within a gate. He soon realizes that his stats have been nerfed again, which is a source of frustration. He checks his own mana. It appears that dimensional travel is always accompanied by adverse consequences. His metrics experienced a significant decline the first time he was transported from Earth to another world, approximately 100 years ago. Presently, it appears that the same pattern is being repeated. Currently, he possesses only 20% of his former power, which is beyond frustrating. Even Frey is displeased. He desires for Si-woo to recover as soon as possible, as he will be unable to utilize his exceptional abilities if he does not. However, Si-woo is equally frustrated, as it will require at least a decade to regain his lost vitality. Frey immediately expressed his desire to terminate their contract upon learning of this. As Si-woo's current vitality is so pitiful that he is virtually useless to him. During their argument, the scene transitions to a woman who is being pursued by an orc, causing her to pant excessively. She has entirely lost track of her teammates and is unsure of what to do. More importantly, she has yet to determine the reason for the presence of an orc at this early stage in the dungeon. She abruptly loses her balance and falls. However, my friend Si-woo delivers a solitary punch to the orc before he can dismember her. And the most remarkable aspect is that he does not even bother to glance in the orc's direction. That is the extent to which the threat is insignificant to him. Si-woo turns to the girl, requesting confirmation that the planet they are presently on is Earth. The girl, who is already feeling overwhelmed, is able to respond positively. Thus, he inquires further, inquiring as to whether this is Korea and what year it is. The girl affirms once more with a yes and further elaborates that the year is 2037. The mention of 2037 prompts our child to contemplate. He recalls that the year was 2027 when he was pulled into that other dimension. If his reasoning is accurate, then the 100 years he spent in the demon domain were equivalent to only 10 years on Earth. Si-woo subsequently inquires about the identity of the current president. Choi Dae-soo is the name that the female responds with. Si-woo is left in a state of complete disbelief, as it transpires that he is acquainted with this individual. He does not appear to have a positive memory of President Choi Dae-soo, as evidenced by his expression. The girl begins to question whether this individual is merely acting as a regressor, as he murmurs a variety of peculiarities. Si-woo then addresses her with an additional inquiry. He is interested in verifying whether they are within a gate, as the mana flow appears to be irregular. The girl promptly confirms this, and further elaborates that they are located within the tutorial tower. The female proceeds to disclose all the specifics, as Si-woo has never encountered the tutorial tower concept. A few years ago, the tower was constructed to serve as a gateway for hunters. By clearing it, you awaken your abilities and acquire new talents. Additionally, your privileges are enhanced by your awakening classification, which includes the opportunity to be recruited by the most powerful guilds. Therefore, it is only natural that everyone is in a hurry to demolish the tower as soon as feasible. Back in his era, Si-woo distinctly recalls that the awakened were granted their powers without any additional complications. To exit this location, he must simply clear the pinnacle, according to his comprehension. Subsequently, he inquires as to how long it typically requires. The girl elucidates that the average time is approximately 8 weeks. Nevertheless, it is feasible to resolve it within 6 weeks, provided that one is sufficiently proficient. Currently, Ryu Ji-won, a second-generation genius hunter, holds the record for the fastest time to complete the task, which was 3 weeks. However, my partner is not particularly startled or taken aback. They abruptly perceive the presence of a massive entity in the vicinity, and in due course, a gigantic mutant tiger emerges, a creature that is referred to as the Phantom Tiger. Sai-Wu is still lost in contemplation, contemplating the record holder, as the girl panics at the sight of this terrifying beast. In his opinion, the tower's completion in 3 weeks is not particularly noteworthy. It is excessively lengthy. However, he is uncertain if he can accomplish the task any more rapidly due to the fact that his own abilities have been diminished. In the interim, the tiger is preparing to consume the dyad by swishing its tongue around its lips. Eventually, the tiger charges at them. However, Si-Wu is still in a state of deep reflection, pondering about the manner in which he will approach the trial tower. He punches the giant cat without even moving or glancing back at the threat, as he does not wish to interrupt his train of thought. The creature's jaw is literally broken by that single strike. Finally, Sai-Wu confronts his own limitations and determines that 5 days should suffice to eliminate the tower. The scene transitions to Min Se-jun, the Empire Guild commander, after 5 days have passed. According to his assistant, an individual has recently vacated the tutorial tower. Upon hearing this, Se-jun comes to the realization that the trial has only been underway for 8 weeks. Therefore, the tower can be cleared within that time frame without any issues. Nevertheless, the assistant makes a startling disclosure. The individual who cleared the tower was not included in the initial entry manifest. Their cohort and their entry into the tower are not documented. Currently, this individual who remains unknown is causing quite a stir in the vicinity. Jun's eyes widen in astonishment when the assistant reveals the individual's identity, as the face appears to be oddly familiar. He recognizes him as Hyung, his older sibling who had vanished a decade prior. We will now return to Sai-Wu and the female who is with him. The woman is completely perplexed. She has not yet been able to determine how this individual was able to complete the tutorial tower in a mere 5 days. However, it is evident from the manner in which my colleague has destroyed the final remaining creature. The system promptly declares that the tutorial is finished. However, it fails to compute Wu's skills and statistics. Sai-Wu is prepared to embark on the subsequent chapter of his existence as the gate opens. The examiner greets him outside the tutorial structure. The individuals in the audience are unable to suppress their whispers and murmurs regarding Sai-Wu. Then, a large individual enters the scene, evidently not enjoying the chaos. The examiner is informed of the details by this large individual, who is alleged to be the chief of Team 2. He mentions that 2 individuals have recently passed through the gate. However, it is alarming that one of them was not included in the entry manifest. The initial observation is that the large individual is impervious to scratches as he examines Si-Wu. Given the scrawny appearance of Si-Wu, it is impossible for him to have escaped so readily. His curiosity is aroused, and he resolves to personally question Si-Wu, pushing the examiner aside. He initiates the conversation by inquiring as to who Sai-Wu is and why his name is not included in the documents. Sai-Wu nonchalantly responds that he did not enter through the entrance. The large individual, however, is not persuaded. He contends that individual who enters through the gate must exit through the same route. Therefore, how did Si-Wu depart without ever entering? Nevertheless, Si-Wu maintains an air of indifference, declining to seriously consider this oversized jerk. Additionally, this demeanor is beginning to irritate the larger individual. He is enraged and aims a finger at Si-Wu's head, addressing him as a fool. The large individual issues a direct threat, convinced that Sai-Wu must possess some form of camouflage ability that enables him to pass undetected. He explicitly states that Si-Wu is doomed if he fails to disclose the truth. However, Si-Wu maintains the same impassive expression, which only serves to exacerbate the annoyance of this loudmouth, causing him to become more aggressive and abusive with his words. Regrettably, Si-Wu is unable to endure the incessant chatter of an individual, particularly when the individual's breath is unpleasantly odorous. Therefore, without hesitation, he commands this substantial pile of refuse to cease speaking. Sai-Wu is more than prepared to engage in a physical altercation with this individual, who is evidently eager for one. To further irritate him, Sai-Wu delivers another jab, criticizing him for his despicable odor. That concludes the matter. The large man accepts the lure, raises his thick hands, and strikes Sai-Wu. However, Sai-Wu remains unperturbed. Subsequently, the inevitable transpires. The events transpire directly in front of Guildmaster Se-jun. A short time later, all of the individuals who were foolish enough to interfere with Sai-Wu are disposed of on the ground. Every member of the staff is in a state of uproar. The individual who had been reported for causing a disturbance not only engaged in a physical altercation with the security team, but also disappeared immediately. Guildmaster Sejun promptly instructs his personnel to access the CCTV footage. The recording captures the big man and his henchmen charging at Siwoo when they do. However, in the next instant, Siwoo accelerates so rapidly that the camera is unable to capture him. In the interim, each of those ignorant individuals is rendered unconscious. Siwoo is reported to have killed 5 hunters prior to his disappearance, according to one of the staff members. The staff's sole logical explanation is that he must have employed covert abilities, as no one witnessed him depart. However, Sejun is of the opposite opinion. In his opinion, Siwoo did not employ any theatrics. The individual proceeded at an extraordinary pace. Sejun is absolutely certain that this is his sibling, Siwoo, from within. He appears to have remained unchanged from a decade ago, based on his current perspective. He then addresses his employees and gives them a clear directive. They are required to mobilize all members of the Empire Guild to promptly locate the individual in question. Nevertheless, he severely forbids them from engaging in any form of confrontation with this enigmatic individual. They merely need to identify themselves in a polite manner and accompany him to the office. Sejun desires to meet him in reality. Despite the staff's haste to execute his directives, Sejun remains perplexed as to where Siwoo has been for the past year, only to have him unexpectedly appear at this moment. The manner in which he disappeared and re-emerged is dubious. There must be a compelling rationale for it. He is certain that Siwoo would have visited Empire Guild on numerous occasions had he remained in Korea during this period. Sejun is now more intrigued than ever to discover the precise location of his previous travels. Then, he turns his attention to the girl who departed the tutorial tower with Siwoo. However, the unfortunate girl promptly dismisses the notion, asserting that she has no connection to him whatsoever, except for the mere fact that they exited together. Sejun has faith in her. He is legitimately impressed by the fact that she cleared the tower more quickly than anticipated. This implies only one thing. She must have acquired some reasonable abilities. The girl becomes agitated upon hearing this, and modestly acknowledges that she was able to obtain an A-rank skill. Sejun is already contemplating recruiting her into the Empire Guild in advance, as that is a significant accomplishment. Therefore, he guarantees that the contract terms will be customized to her preferences. His sole aspiration is that she will be delighted to enroll in their program. Of course, the lady was overjoyed with this opportunity. She accepts it without hesitation. Right at that moment, an arrogant individual enters the scene. Naturally, his initial action is to disparage the Empire Guild's reputation. The loudmouth is promptly identified by Sejun, who cautions him to exercise caution with his words. Hunter Ryu Ji-won, the guildmaster of Gyeomgang Guild and an S-rank hunter, is the individual in question. Standing beside him is Choi Sung-gil, an additional S-rank hunter who oversees the White Lion Guild. It appears that these two have also become aware of the unregistered individuals who successfully cleared the tower. Ryu Ji-won is taken aback by the fact that a single individual has the ability to physically assault the entire security team. Ryu is confident that the individual in question possesses significant power, as evidenced by the pitiful condition of the Guardians. This sentiment is also expressed by Choi Sung-gil. This is precisely the reason why he is eager to locate the enigmatic awakened as soon as possible. It is probable that this individual will develop into a top-tier prodigy in the future if he has awakened a high-grade skill, and neither of these guildmasters intends to allow him to escape. They both desire him for their own purposes. Ryu Ji-won resolves to transform it into a challenge. The individual who discovers the enigmatic awakened first is entitled to claim him. There are no regulations regarding the types of unethical strategies that they may employ. He is retained by the individual who possesses him first. Choi Sung-gil is entirely supportive of this strategy. Neither of them has the luxury of time, as they will be independently seeking for the enigmatic awakened. They immediately embarked on a mission to locate the individual. Additionally, the individual who locates him first is responsible for informing the others. Ray Ji-won departs with that, but not before delivering a blow, asserting that he will be the one to locate the awakened. Therefore, there is no necessity for the others to exert themselves. However, Sejun is uncertain about whether or not he will permit this to transpire. In any case, Ray Ji-won departs and instructs his subordinate, Jin-sik, to collect all C and D rankers from Jeum, Sang's Team A, and deploy them for the search. However, Jin-sik appears to be uncertain about the precise individual they are seeking. Ray Ji-won casually drops the bomb in response, It is Sijin's sibling. In the interim, Siwoo is indulging in his preferred restaurant's fried chicken. Frey is completely perplexed. Siwoo elects to consume cooked birds among the numerous activities he could engage in upon his return to Earth 100 years later. Frey's curiosity is once again piqued when he begins to meander the streets after his chicken spree. He is compelled to inquire about Siwoo's destination. Siwoo does not attempt to provide an explanation. He assumes that it is self-evident. He is, of course, returning home. When he eventually arrives and enters his modest residence, nostalgia overwhelms him. He recalls racing inside at dinner time, where his mother was preparing a meal and his father was reading the newspaper. However, all of those moments are now forgotten in the past. Currently, his residence is nothing more than a dilapidated, deserted husk. He continues to be unable to recall the appearances of his parents. They assert that forgetting is a divine gift. However, it was a burden for him. He endured an interminable bloodbath on a peculiar, brutal planet for 100 years in the demon realm. The deterioration of the ego, the cessation of time, and the dulling of human senses. For what seemed like an eternity, the curse of oblivion threatened to eradicate him. Therefore, he urgently clung to his memories, his younger siblings, and his disciples. Memories that refused to be reduced to mere recollection. As an alternative, they evolved into an obsession, a persistent attachment. However, that was acceptable. He was able to endure for an additional century as a result. Even Frey observes that this location has the appearance of a ghost town, with a chill that surpasses that of the demon domain. Woo's sole purpose in visiting this location was to recollect. It is now time for him to proceed, as he has witnessed everything. He resolved to locate the children from his community with whom he previously engaged in social activities. However, the initial item on his agenda is to meet his sibling, Sijin. However, his attempt to re-establish contact with former acquaintances is thwarted when a group of armed criminals surrounds him from all sides. The individual with red hair appears to be the leader of the group. He identifies himself as Byon Hakam, a C-rank hunter from the Vajra Guild. The status of these lowlifes does not faze Siwoo. She remains composed and unconcerned. He is also not in the mood for a skirmish. Hakam experiences feelings of mockery and is reminded of the name of his guild once more. However, my partner remains indifferent once more, as he appears to be unconcerned. Siwoo effortlessly responds to each strike with an even sharper retort, as they continue to exchange jabs. This irritates Hakam, and his forbearance is eroding. Finally, he resolves to impart the lesson that Siwoo deserves, as he is thoroughly irritated. In the subsequent instant, Hakam delivers a forceful punch that causes Siwoo to tumble backward and collide with the wall behind him. Hakam and his lieutenants are ecstatic, as they believe they have successfully silenced Siwoo. However, my partner is the most composed individual I have ever encountered. He is reposing in a manner reminiscent of a chilled cucumber in a refrigerator. He is not rising, which leads the fools to believe that he must have fainted from that solitary blow. Then, a system window appears in front of Siwoo, providing a detailed explanation of the ability that Hakam has just demonstrated. It appears that the skill in question is Lightning Flash, a C-grade ability that provides instantaneous acceleration, thereby substantially increasing the pace of your body. Assuming that your body is capable of withstanding the friction, it is feasible to accelerate your pace. Siwoo casually inquires whether Frey would like to consume the skill, as it is not particularly detrimental. Frey does not object to attempting this skill, as it is the first he is about to ingest upon his return to Earth. So, my individual simply rises to his feet. Then, without warning, he dashes toward Hakam and administers a devastating slap that is so powerful that it directly sends Hakam crashing into the ground, causing it to shatter. The goons, who were just moments ago cackling like hyenas, are now standing in extreme terror. Siwoo subsequently extends his hand, allowing Frey to absorb the skill from this rascal. A sinister magic circle will soon form beneath their feet. The talent extraction is completed in a matter of seconds. Although it is satisfying to finally consume a skill after such a lengthy period, Frey cannot deny that it is significantly less appetizing than the chicken they had previously. In the interim, Hakam, who is now in a state of disarray, orders his subordinates to simultaneously assault Siwoo. They approach him with the recklessness of a group of fools, genuinely believing they have a chance. Siwoo instructs Frey to apply their newly acquired skill. Upon Frey's consent, my individual erupts into action, dashing with godlike speed and eliminating each and every one of these individuals as if they were mere mosquitoes. Attempting to strike Siwoo with a skill, one of the bastards rushes toward him. However, Saiwu effortlessly renders the bastard's assault futile by striking his knee into the man's abdomen, resulting in him coughing up blood. The bastard was employing a vital point strike, a technique that automatically targets an opponent's weak areas. Saiwu determines to borrow the skill for himself, as it is evident that this individual is incapable of utilizing it effectively. However, Saijun arrives on the scene before the situation reaches a fever pitch, and everyone's life is cut short. When Siwoo turns to look at Sejun, he observes his brother's reflection in his eyes, and the once heated battlefield is transformed into a tender reunion of two brothers. Currently, in order to comprehend the events that transpired, we must travel back in time 20 years to the initial emergence of the portals on Earth. It is self-evident that these gates unleashed chaos and devastation, introducing monsters into the world. This was also the time when the first generation of awakened individuals emerged, their capabilities awakening in tandem with the gate's appearance. There were no laws or police to address the predicament. It was a period of barbarism in which all individuals were inexperienced. Siwoo and his younger sibling, Sejun, who lost their parents at a young age, were compelled to survive by any means necessary in this chaotic world. Siwoo was the first generation to awaken. He discontinued his education in order to become a hunter and care for his infant sibling, who was still in need of assistance. Consequently, Siwoo, the compassionate sibling that he was, provided for Sejun during those difficult times. Saiwu is currently accompanying his sibling to their new residence, where an abundance of luxury is evident. Saijun is enamored with the location and is uncertain as to whether his sibling obtained all of the funds independently or obtained a loan. Nevertheless, Siwoo maintains that the funds were derived from the abilities he acquired from his older brother. Siwoo is also permitted to reside in the residence, as it is intended for both individuals. Saiwu is internally unable to comprehend that the individual in his presence is his sibling, who vanished nearly a decade ago. Saiwu is ecstatic at the prospect of once again being able to raise his younger sibling, and he continues to speak without interruption. He can observe the extent to which his younger sibling has exerted himself, and this inspires him to feel profoundly appreciative. Saijun is certain that Saiwu is his biological sibling after witnessing him engage in a prolonged conversation. Saijun then discusses the extent of his search for his older sibling. He is inquisitive about everything. What was his destination? What was the reason for his departure? Also, why did he select this particular time to arrive after such a long period of time? Siwoo has a substantial amount to say, 100 years of adventures. However, that narrative can only be recounted if the two individuals engage in a candid conversation. Consequently, we observe them sitting together as Siwoo elaborates on the events that transpired. In conclusion, Saiwu was transported to a different dimension by an artifact that the fourth demon lord possessed after defeating him 10 years ago. In this alternate reality, he encountered Predator, a being capable of extracting the abilities of others. He developed this talent for a century, employing dimensional magic to pursue dragons. He was eventually able to return home after defeating the Dragon King and obtaining the dimensional orb that the dragon carried. Additionally, his companion Predator, who is also known as Frey, has crossed over to Earth and is currently residing within his body. Sejun is horrified by the revelation that Frey resides within Siwoo's body. The situation is further exacerbated when Saiwu casually discloses that Frey is essentially a parasite that resides in his intestines. Saiwu acknowledges that this entire lore dump is likely to sound completely absurd. However, he assures his younger sibling that he is not making any modifications. Of course, Saijun has faith in his sibling. He is not even surprised by this narrative despite its absurdity, given the significant changes in the world over the past 2 decades. At present, he is simply relieved that his sibling has returned. Now that Siwoo has disclosed his true identity, he desires his younger sibling to do the same and inform him of all the information he has overlooked over the past decade. He is particularly interested in understanding the circumstances that led to the election of a person such as Choi Dae-soo as president. After Sai Woo's disappearance, Choi Dae-soo openly claimed responsibility for the fourth Demon King's defeat. He was able to ascend to the presidency by leveraging his fabricated reputation and the title of the finest hunter of the first generation. Currently, he continues to implement policies that are detrimental to the Empire Guild. However, with S.I. Woo's return, Saijun is apprehensive about the potential harm that the zesty-ass shithead may inflict on his sibling. However, Sai Woo is not at all concerned. In reality, he finds it highly amusing that an individual as incompetent as Choi Dae-soo was able to deceive everyone with his fabricated doubles-rank title. Siwoo abruptly recalls the individuals who had previously assaulted him at their residence, in reference to Choi. The commander of that gang claimed to be affiliated with the Jeumgang Guild. Therefore, Siwoo is interested in determining whether they are Choi Dae, Su's retainers. His younger sibling responds with a resolute no to this assertion, as the guild that Choi Dae-soo leads is known as Infinite. South Korea is home to 7 representative guilds, collectively referred to as the Heptagram. Empire, the guild that Sejun oversees, is one of them. Infinite, Vajra, White Lion, Fighting Warrior, Azure Flower, and Frozen Soul are the remaining items. Vajra is the property of Ryu Ji-hwan, a second-generation hunter. Sai, Jun's wrath boils at the mere mention of this cretin. To believe that the snake is pursuing his senior sibling, who has recently returned home after a decade away. Siwoo then inquires about his brother's disciples, who have consistently supported him. Saijun clarifies that they have not been in contact with each other recently because they have been living apart for an extended period. Kang Yohwa is under Choi Dae, Su's control, and Xiaolong has returned home. Siwoo was not anticipating this information. However, he is optimistic that Minjun is still alive. However, our boy is completely taken aback when his junior sibling informs him that Minjun has been killed, which is in stark contrast to his expectations. He proceeds to question his sibling regarding the perpetrator of his murder without delay. Sejun elucidates that Minjun's body vanished, rendering it impossible to determine the perpetrator. The sole individuals capable of killing a hunter are other hunters, or unregistered awakened individuals. HMCS was involved in the investigation at that time. However, there was no advancement. Siwoo begins to experience a state of confusion as he is presented with one brutal truth explosion after another. Then, he inquires about the status of HMCS. His brother reminds him once more that those individuals are responsible for cases such as homicide, so it is not the most advantageous course of action at this time. He intends to prioritize his brother's recuperation. Subsequent to his complete recuperation, he will contemplate his subsequent actions. This is the moment when Siwoo reminds his subordinate that he has engaged in all manner of shady activities as a result of his 100-year battle in the other world. He does not believe that he is lacking in any area of expertise. It appears that Sejun has exhausted his arguments, and as a result, he is compelled to comply with his senior brother's requests. Ultimately, he resolves to arrange a date for his sibling with Yi Yeji, a manager at Frozen Soul, a hunter agency. Siwoo is delighted to learn this and eagerly anticipates it. Sejun observes that Siwoo's appearance remains consistent despite the altered environment. Sejun is intrigued by the possibility of what transpired in the world of the past that would have influenced his significant transformation. In the interim, our protagonist is engaged in research regarding HMCS when he is met with an unexpected turn of events. Wang Zhonggu, a 1/5 generation hunter, serves as the team leader of the Gangbuk district squad of the HMCS. It has been discovered that Siwoo is intimately familiar with this individual. We arrive at the headquarters of the HMCS in Gangbuk district 2 days later. A ponytailed male is erupting in a fit of rage within the premises. He appears to be displeased that an individual from a superior position has once again dispatched a novice to join his team. He is the team leader, and it is understandable that he is irritated by the presence of yet another novice under his supervision. Zhonggu is the name of this individual, as you may have already deduced. He reminisces about the bygone era, when battlefields were unpredictable and strength solely determined victory. In the past, hunters composed wills prior to embarking on expeditions, understanding that they might not return. Additionally, he recalls that he was nearly killed during a mission approximately 10 years ago. The wound he sustained was fatal, and he was still a novice when it occurred. The party would have suffered a significant loss if he had passed away. Nevertheless, it was a singular healer with extraordinary abilities who succeeded in saving him. Furthermore, we are all aware of the identity of that physician. The healer in question has recently entered the office in a magnificent manner. Siwoo addresses his former friend Byung-gu by his previous name and promptly inquires as to why he changed it. He reminds Byung-gu that he is the individual with the extraordinary healing abilities who saved his life at that time in order to revive his memory. Byung-gu's recognition of him is swift, and his reaction is one of complete disbelief. It was the last thing he anticipated to see Hunterman Siwoo standing before him, adorning their office. Later, we witness Byung-gu formally introduce Siwoo as a new recruit for the Gangbuk team. Although Byung-gu is informing his staff that they should assist Siwoo with any requirements, his abrupt change in demeanor is not unnoticed. One of the female employees appears to be visibly disheartened. Just a moment ago, the team leader, who is reputed to be strict and exceptional, was expressing his dissatisfaction with a new employee. Presently, he is behaving in a cavalier manner. However, the individual who is standing beside her discreetly advises her to refrain from speaking. This newcomer is not your typical novice, as evidenced by the team leader's response. In the interim, Byung-gu addresses the female staff member Seung-ah and, in his customary condescending manner, instructs her to accompany him to the concrete room for a briefing. The other staff members begin to infer that this new recruit may be a 3-star, as they observe the excessive amount of protocol their team leader is imposing on him. We later find ourselves in the workplace, where the team leader is, as anticipated, completely enamored with Saiwoo. He is frantically preparing coffee and doing everything in his power to maximize his hospitality. It is important to remember that Kim Sung-ah is present to provide our child with a briefing. She serves as the data manager for the Gangbuk staff. Saiwoo finally speaks up, requesting the records of all hunters who were killed in the prior 2 decades. He desires that she compile the data and transmit it to him. Saiwung is taken aback by his ostentatious request. The quantity of data spanning 20 years is substantial, and in order to access it, they would be required to submit a report to the Hunter Association. However, the team leader, evidently displeased with her hesitation, instructs her to comply with the directive. He also assures Si-woo that the data manager will handle the matter promptly and efficiently, so there is no need for concern. Seung-ah then inquires whether he is exclusively referring to humans. He responds that cases that have been formally recognized as murders by HMCS will suffice. He is also interested in a list of hunter murderers who are still at large. Saiwoo believes that it is virtually impossible to kill an awakened unless the attacker is also an awakened of equal strength. A professional is likely to be responsible for killing a top-tier hunter like Minjun. If they had been captured or slain, there should be a record of them, even if they had been reawakened. At present, the primary objective is to locate them. Sung-ah has discovered the information. However, she is uncertain about the most effective method of dissemination. Si-woo instructs her to forward it to his mobile device for the time being. Suddenly, the team leader is summoned for a private conversation. The individual informs them that the authorities have submitted a request for assistance. Gangs have engaged in a full-scale conflict and some of them have been roused. Cerberus is one of the groups involved, which is why the police are hesitant to intervene. The team commander is exceedingly irritated by this, while Si-woo is unaware of the existence of Cerberus. Seung-ah then clarifies that Cerberus is not your typical gang. They are contract murderers and arms traffickers. There are even allegations that they are involved in hunter trafficking, rendering them far too hazardous for the regular police to manage. Woo's curiosity is particularly piqued by this, particularly the aspect of hunter trafficking. Because if that is accurate, it could be associated with the assassination of one of his disciples whose body was never discovered. Therefore, he instructs Byung-gu to accompany him. The team leader, who is irritated by being addressed by his previous name, reminds Si-woo that his current name is Jong-gu. The scene transitions to the battlefield. Cerberus has just delivered their bodies to the bloodless Reaper gang. Kang-ho, the second in command of Cerberus, is feeling quite pleased with himself after eliminating them. Next to him, Jikin, the third in command, is making dark quips about the ease with which they can penetrate their adversaries. Their moment of celebration is abruptly interrupted as these villains bask in their victory. The region is jolted by a substantial detonation. Of course, our boy is the one who nonchalantly walks into the scene after blowing out the building wall to make his entrance. Si-woo is certain that Kang-ho has slain a few hunters to be riding this high horse, judging by the way he is unrelentingly talking. This causes him to be ecstatic. He desires for this individual to demonstrate his capabilities. By the way, it appears that this unsavory website has omitted a few panels, as the conversation between the characters indicates that we have overlooked the section in which they actually engage in a battle with Si-woo. At present, they are experiencing an overwhelming sense of despair. Our son operates at an entirely distinct level. Despite the fact that he arrived unaccompanied, he is still causing them to flee for their lives. Kang-ho deploys his complete body armor, a B-rank skill that amplifies his resistance to both physical and magical attacks, after numerous unsuccessful attempts to subdue him. As Kang-ho advances, his subordinates mimic his actions. Si-woo promptly eliminates them. In addition to defeating them, he ensures that their abilities are appropriated. It appears that Si-woo's sole purpose for visiting this location was to evaluate his own capabilities. It was his intention to evaluate the current level of strength among awakened criminals. He concluded that it would be prudent to terminate these individuals prematurely, as they appeared to be in a state of irrelevance. The team leader eventually arrives at that point, reporting that he has cleared out the entire upper floor of the club. But the unfortunate individual is left completely bewildered upon observing the numerous corpses that litter the ground. Nevertheless, Siwoo proudly asserts that he only left one individual alive, the shining star amid the shit, because they required at least one individual to be alive for the purpose of interrogation. The team leader, who is apprehensive, commences a tirade regarding the legal protocols, specifically the requirement to capture them alive. However, he ultimately determines to just frame it as self-defense, as those bastards attacked first. The genuine reason for his anxiety is that these individuals were so brutal that there were already warrants for their imminent execution. However, the notion that Siwoo independently addressed them is simply absurd. He now has no qualms about the reason why Siwoo was regarded as a crazed dog. Siwoo and the team leader engage in conversation, and the camera pans to a coward who is concealed beneath a piece of furniture. He promptly contacts his superior and informs him that the Cerberus gang has been entirely eradicated. Gert, the guildmaster of Hong Kong's Red Guild and an A-rank hunter, is the prominent figure on the other end of the contact. Gert is in a hurry and eager to see his sibling. The members of the association extend their apologies and extend their condolences to him. However, this individual has arrived with a singular goal in mind: to locate his sibling. He discovers that Jiken's body is presently being held for a forensics investigation. Therefore, they require his assistance in verifying the body in order to proceed with the procedures. The redhead hunter is pleased with the direction of this conversation. He had previously discovered that the individual who had taken his sibling down was associated with the HMCS organization. The claims have not yet been verified by the agents of the associations. Gert, who is now feeling aggravated, inquires whether he is permitted to depart the premises independently. The agents inform him that it is not permissible, as he is required to remain in his designated location for the time being. If he fails to comply, the association will enforce international law and subject him to deportation penalties. Gert is the one who is being criticized in this conversation. Despite his anger, he now understands that they are granting him temporary freedom as a result of his brother's misfortune. He assigns his assistant, Ryu Yanping, to perform his illicit activities on his behalf. This individual is a B-rank hunter, which means that he is also no laughing matter. Gert is consumed by a burning desire to avenge his sibling and is in a state of rage. We should proceed to Siwoo, who is currently relaxing in a relaxed manner. In addition to Minjin's murder, his sibling informs him that his residence was burglarized. The mana in this world is particularly useful in that it can be readily traced and analyzed, thereby revealing the hunter's rank and attributes. Therefore, the association can readily identify the perpetrators of the crime. However, in this instance, the perpetrator is a cunning individual who concealed their activities. Minjin was an archaeologist who possessed significant research assets. However, not a single item harboring his mana was left behind. Siwoo is amused by the possibility that this is a typical burglary rather than a premeditated attack at this juncture. However, Sejun perceives this statement as absurd. Siwoo substantiates his response by asserting that the stolen items were of considerable value, as indicated by the report. This implies that there is a higher likelihood of leaving a fragment of evidence behind. Siwoo concludes that the most effective method for the perpetrator to conceal their mana traces would be to destroy the entire location, which is somewhat logical. This implies that the homicide of Min Jun and the robbery were distinct criminal incidents. His death was simply exploited by an individual. Siwoo maintains that he has encountered additional instances of this nature in the past, which implies that it is feasible. Despite his brother's belief that Minjun's possessions may be a lost cause, he is determined to initiate the investigation and resolve the case. Siwoo is a courageous individual who is prepared to solve the case. Shortly thereafter, this unyielding assurance begins to erode. He is furious in an alleyway, blaming the numerous criminals who are skulking around, yet there were no valuable leads. Siwoo is now raving like a maniac, as he has reached a dead end. After this, my brother requires a Snickers bar. In any case, Sherlock Holmes is fortunate enough to overhear a conversation between two unrelated hooligans. They are discussing the organization's ability to close down multiple locations and eliminate entire groups without the necessity of warrants or reports. The organization possesses sufficient influence and authority to investigate any issues concerning hunters worldwide, and as a result, they are of little concern whether they are directly dispatching criminals to hell. The organization's brutality is so severe that the most detrimental experience is not a prison cell, but rather the burial ground itself. Simultaneously, individuals who are proficient in hunting are not typically inclined to join an organization such as the HMCS. They would much prefer to be affiliated with a guild that provides a more significant bundle. Nevertheless, the individual who is causing such a disturbance poses a threat to these individuals. Therefore, they occupy themselves by relocating their warehouse in order to ensure its safety. Sherlock Holmes, having heard enough, discloses his identity and inquires openly about their warehouse. They are terrified of him. Rabbitface is frightened to death because he recognizes Siwoo as the individual who is responsible for cleaning up the offenders. As an emergency call-out, the boss promptly summons his troops. Siwoo, who has yet to bend a knee, inquires about the warehouse's location, this time in a threatening manner. The supervisor is prepared to forego his stickman in favor of an assistant in order to preserve his life. Fortunately, his troops arrive promptly at the location, which gives him confidence in his ability to prevail in this conflict. The arrogant supervisor is under the impression that they have achieved victory by outnumbering the HMCS investigator and that they will now be able to easily eliminate him. However, our son is exceedingly pleased that they exerted the effort to arrange themselves for him. He is now able to freely practice and target his new skill. Siwoo activates his ability, causing the men to be utterly blinded by a shimmer of golden light. An electrical strike ultimately results in the defeat of all of the soldiers. He approaches the subordinate and inquires whether he is prepared to disclose the warehouse's location at this time. Upon witnessing this monstrous investigator eliminate all of their soldiers, he is left to query whether Siwoo is even human. To this, our son responds with joy, declaring himself to be a lunatic. The sequence concludes with the assistants being apprehended. Minjin's confidential research journal enables Siwoo to advance. It is actually well protected by a security spell, which further explains why no one else has been able to break it. The seal necessitates a portion of the owner's original mana, and Siwoo is not primarily interested in the book's contents, but rather in the mana that is contained within. He determines to contact Byung-gu, requesting a cleanup squad and a vehicle to address the criminals he has just cleared. Regarding him, he has an obligation to be somewhere. In the subsequent scenario, we are introduced to a neutral zone, which is akin to a secret market where peculiar abilities are traded. The Black Skyfall is a market that is based on talent. In this instance, a woman is engaged in card games. I assume that she is engaging in some form of witchcraft or other illicit activity, as she perceives Siwoo's arrival. This woman is Moomyoung, the famous shaman, and she is one of the 5 chiefs of the market. Siwoo examines the industry, noting that there has been minimal change since a decade ago. Frey asserts that he is considered quite popular, with everyone's attention directed toward him. Our son is reluctant to physically assault individuals in this location, as it could result in legal consequences for him. Moomyoung emerges to greet him, which is intriguing. She had intended to converse with him. She remarks that he has not changed a day in a decade within her premises. She is curious as to what business ventures he has been involved in. He was absent for an extended period of time, after all. Siwoo does not wish to elaborate on the entire century-long ordeal that he endured. Rather, he presents her with the confidential journal in order to extract the mana. Moomyoung appreciates his uncomplicated demeanor and serves as a reminder of the procedure. Siwoo is already well-versed in the subject, as evidenced by his ability to extract blood by cutting a small portion of his forearm. The reasoning behind it is associated with prana. It is nearly impossible to restore mana to its original state. Curry serves as an analogy. The powder, water, and other ingredients cannot be precisely separated or returned to their original state, despite the fact that they can be removed from the completed curry, such as vegetables. However, this type of impossibility is rendered obsolete by the expertise of this woman, who remains anonymous. She is a mana hacker who employs powers that defy causality. It is a superpower that is exclusive to her. Additionally, this is the reason society regards individuals such as her with suspicion, as they are concerned that they may be criminals in concealment. In any case, she successfully hacks the mana and derives pleasure from the completion of the process. Even Frey believes that she is exceedingly unsettling. She also does not charge him. Siwoo departs without providing any further explanation, as she is in a haste. The antagonist characterizes him as an enigmatic individual, while Frey is profoundly unnerved by her. Siwoo is also perplexed as to the reason for Frey's distress. It was merely a ritual that served as a contract, requiring a minor amount of his blood. Anyhow, Siwoo's subsequent destination is the History Research Institute. the site of Minjin's assassination. Once inside, he encounters no difficulty in navigating the premises, as it is owned by the Empire Guild. Siwoo is taken aback upon his arrival at this location, as he observes the persistent phantoms of those who continue to reject Minjin's demise. Siwoo is interested in verifying the memories of the events that transpired on the day of the crime. He casts Mana Remembrance to accomplish that effect, which enables him to experience the emotions of the mana wielder through a medium. This results in Siwoo observing an avatar version of the occurrences. Regrettably, the skill does not display the target's memories and instead concentrates on their emotions, rendering him unable to see clearly. Siwoo is now sufficiently intelligent to recognize that Minjin was more than a competent hunter. This implies that the individual who removed him must have possessed exceptional skill in order to have surpassed him. The culprit is actually one of the VIPs, as Siwoo realizes as his final moments unfold. In addition to the research institution, Minjin maintained a more profound relationship with an additional organization. Frey is uncertain as to whether our son is doing well, as his primary concern was his siblings and disciples, even in the demon realm. Despite the passage of a century, the initial thought that occurred to him upon his arrival on Earth was to locate them. He has recently discovered that one of his disciples has decomposed into oblivion. Frey is aware that it must be having a profound impact on him. Siwoo opts not to concentrate on the subject, but his companion can discern that his emotions are escalating at an alarming rate. It is simply that Siwoo does not convey those emotions through his facial expressions. Siwoo emphasizes that he is fine, and that it is entirely natural for him to experience a collapse after a century, regardless of the extent of his internal suffering. Ryu emerges from behind in an unexpected turn of events. He has been exceedingly irritated by the extent to which he has been required to supervise our son throughout the day. Siwoo confidently identifies all 6 of his goons who are concealed in secrecy, despite Ryu's request that he accompany him on a visit. Ryu is impressed by his perception and therefore decides to present him with 2 alternatives. The initial possibility is that he complies voluntarily and proceeds with the group without causing any disruptions. The second method, which is the more difficult, involves him being dismembered and dragged all the way to their leader. I am confident that you will not approve of his subsequent actions. Our child voluntarily raises his hands in surrender, without causing any disturbance. Ryu instructs his men to physically restrain him. However, this was precisely the outcome Siwoo desired. He lured one of the men and then cut him open, thereby disclosing his true intentions. Gert ultimately emerges, declaring that he will be the one to clean up his target, as the other men attempt to jump on him in the Jujutsu Kaisen style. Siwoo is unaffected and encourages him to attempt the task. Gert initiates the conversation by verifying that he is indeed the individual who terminated Jaiken, his sibling, from the Cerberus gang. In response, Siwoo states in a composed manner that he did not consider the man's identity or bother to inquire with anyone. He did not engage in any significant activities beyond the removal of multiple pieces of garbage. Gert is sent into a state of agitation by this callous remark, and he proceeds to attack him with extreme force. Our lad is unconcerned, despite the fact that the redhead's confidence overpowers him. The A-rank hunter, who immediately launches an extreme offensive, is taken aback by his ability to cast instant restoration. Even Gert's subordinates are taken aback by Siwoo's ability to impede the assaults of an A-rank hunter. Siwoo ensures that the remaining blockheads are not involved in the conflict by employing his lightning discharge skill. This immediately eliminates the mafia characters, as he is more interested in confronting a powerful individual. They are incredulous that he is not only an exceptional combat specialist, but also a potent healer. The individual was capable of accurately interpreting Gert's actions and responding accordingly. The A-rank hunter has never encountered another hunter with this level of precision, and he considers our son to be a threat that is unparalleled. This implies that Gert's sole opportunity to prevail is to operate at maximum capacity. However, this individual's delusional convictions are truly admirable. Siwoo intends to serve as a reminder that criminals must be held accountable for their actions, regardless of their identity. The criminals who have been roused are currently being pursued by a hunter. This is Siwoo's responsibility. However, these arrogant individuals believe that they are the ones being victimized, rather than concentrating on the harm they have inflicted on society as a whole. Gert dislikes Siwoo's explanation because it suggests that he is permitted to murder any criminal who has committed a crime. He vehemently defends his deceased sibling, who is incapable of comprehending the life they shared. Ultimately, Jiken became a criminal in order to provide for Gert while he was weak. It was his method of guaranteeing the survival of both of them. Gert desires to recompense the investigator for the reckless destruction of a life without comprehending its significance. He activates his Wolfang skill, which is considered one of his most potent weapons. Siwoo is immediately aware that he is not intended to avoid this attack upon observing the red mana. Despite the fact that his companion is fatigued from providing him with an abundance of resources today, he requests that Frey utilize another skill. Siwoo guarantees that he will independently manage the conflict following the skill's implementation. He invokes Neutralization, a concealed class spell that not only determines the opponent's spell level but also reinstates it and negates it with a magic circle. Gert is incredulous about the recent events. Ryu is incapable of comprehending the actions of this apparently ordinary healer. It was astonishing that this individual had just neutralized the potent skill of an A-rank hunter. Currently, they are the ones being subdued by a single individual. Gert's sentimental approach is mocked by Siwoo, who goes on the offensive and cites the example of individuals who endured comparable hardships to Jiken but did not engage in criminal activity. He delivers a devastating blow to the guildmaster, causing him to become airborne. His most recent assault has resulted in a bruise on his arm, which serves as a protective barrier against the impact. Gert is opposed to his troops participating in the situation. Knowing that Siwoo is incapable of consistently casting a neutralization spell, he conducts an analysis of the situation. He intends to subject our child to a battle of endurance, as it is inevitable that he will exhaust his mana. Gert employs the same ability as before, concentrating his energy into a focused point and attempting to strike him down. However, Siwoo casually avoids the blow without sacrificing any of his own spells. He cleverly responds by delivering a knee to Gert's face, and then showers him with a torrent of strikes, mocking the criminal for exceeding his capabilities when his body is incapable of keeping up. Gert is able to surprise Siwoo in a fit of anger. He then instructs two of his men to restrain Siwoo while he is defenseless in the air. Ryu is slightly irritated by his boss's dual-mindedness. At first, he intended to avoid their intervention. However, he is now seeking their assistance. In any case, Gert emerges to execute one final closing move to terminate Siwoo's life, while he is restrained by chains. This time, he intends to ensure that the individual is completely healed, but this individual is exceedingly relaxed. Despite the fact that the odds are piled against him, he simply does not care. Siwoo commends both Gert and Jiken for their criminal activities before employing the lifesteal incantation to absorb the target's life essence. This results in a gruesome experience for his opponent, as his body gradually deteriorates. The sight of his leader transforming into an undead corpse is so shocking that even Ryu is filled with horror. Amusingly, this was the initial skill that our son acquired. He is the genuine article, and he clarifies to them that he was never an ordinary physician. This spell entails the manipulation of the life force itself, which allows for the use of life-spirit sorcery. He turns to Ryu, who is flailing like a fish in the pond as he is down. Our son is not amenable to his pleading or yelling, and he responds by delivering painful karate strikes. He directs his attention to the camera that each investigator possesses. Siwoo is optimistic that the recording was successfully transmitted in its entirety, as he wishes to ensure that the evidence of his self-defense is captured. Byung-gu and the others witness the entirety of the conflict, and their reactions are invaluable. By mistake, this individual activated the live button rather than the record button, which enabled nearly 6,000 viewers to view his broadcast. This resulted in a highly problematic situation, as it endangered the organization's reputation. As it turns out, the broadcasting feature has been in existence for 2 years, primarily for the purpose of talent recruitment. However, it ultimately proved to be a futile endeavor. People have come to the realization that an individual of extraordinary strength has joined the organization solely based on this footage. However, the query remains, what is the reason? In any case, the more pressing matter is that this individual viciously murdered a guildmaster. And although the investigator did not commit any specific offenses, it is still a reasonable factor to consider. Finally, Choi Dae-soo, Korea's most influential individual, actively participates in the discourse. In the cafeteria of the Empire Guild, Siwoo was consuming a that had been made available to the public a mere few days later. Even Frey is displeased that he is being interrupted during a meal. He is delighted with the cuisine in this location and anticipates indulging in it frequently due to its exceptional quality. In any case, the internet is ablaze with excitement as Gert's defeat is broadcast live. Siwoo's face was scarcely discernible during the incident, as it was captured by a body camera. Dae-soo, the president, would incur severe repercussions if he were to become aware of this. Additionally, the president has made an effort to eradicate any evidence of our son's existence for the past decade. This implies that he poses a distinct threat, and the most viable approach is to remain undetected. However, Siwoo, being the benevolent sibling that he is, makes a lighthearted joke about the situation without regard for the repercussions. In any case, Siwoo is confronted by a number of individuals whom he encountered at the tower. In addition to awakening as an A-ranker, Shinjusu has recently joined their guild, all due to Siwoo's efforts. However, this prompts the guildmaster to inquire whether there is a seminar available for the remaining hunters to attend. His beliefs are verified. Chuhaman and Yamato, two additional hunters represented by distinct guilds, are introduced. Additionally, Taiji, a member of the Imperial Guild, has been apprised of numerous details regarding Siwoo by their guildmaster. In any case, they are exceedingly pleased of his accomplishments for the organization. Heyman is immediately distrustful of Siwoo, despite the fact that he returns the pleasantries. He is aware that Siwoo is accountable for the downfall of Gert, who was intended to be his everlasting adversary. It is nearly absurd. Heyman does not subscribe to it and regards it as a bunch of foolishness. The guildmaster responds with a grave expression, emphasizing that he is being impolite to a significant individual on the guild's primary premises. Rather than correcting himself, Heyman attributes the situation to the Empire Guild's excessively stringent stance. In any case, this escalates into a dispute, prompting the other two hunters to withdraw from the situation. Heyman is unafraid of the repercussions of being reported to the superiors and refuses to back down. He speaks highly of his accomplishments. However, the specificity of his status as Xiaolong's disciple is the most striking to Siwoo. Hamon's continuous ranting has prompted Siwoo to silence him, suggesting that he should simply locate him at a later time if he is so frantic. He also ridicules his master for neglecting to instruct this individual in the appropriate methods of combat. It is a potent slander that resonates with Heyman, who would have responded with force if they were in a different guild location. He threatens Siwoo to exercise caution at night by kicking the chair away in exasperation. My brother is behaving in a manner that is reminiscent of the boogeyman. He should cease employing threats that are of a high school nature. In any case, the guildmaster elects to disregard all of the aforementioned, even assuring his sibling that he will manage the slimy rat. However, Siwoo maintains that everything is acceptable, as this individual is merely the student of his own disciple. Consequently, he is amenable to his arrogance. Moving forward, we observe Jianho, the branch director, conversing with the guildmaster Sungil of the White Lion. In addition to the collaboration, he wishes to communicate a contrition. The contrition is for the incident that occurred as a result of one of their members retaliating against the HMCS member. Nevertheless, the branch director rebuffs such an apology, asserting that a guild leader such as himself should not be required to repent for such conduct. In reality, the branch director has effortlessly identified this individual, as he has identified his intention to investigate rather than offer an apology. Regrettably, Jianho is resolute in his refusal to allow any guild to possess our son. The guildmaster acknowledges that he has been identified. However, he finds it peculiar that an individual such as Siwoo is providing assistance in a prison as his current assignment. Instead of the organization, these types of requests are typically addressed by larger guilds. On the other hand, the branch director is optimistic about the future and anticipates a change in progress. Sungil agrees and maintains that he would be content with Hunter Chu Heyman, the agitator, apologizing to Siwoo independently. The branch director is amenable to this. He believes that it is a personal matter that requires the attention of both parties. That concludes their meeting. Sungil is engrossed in contemplation as he exits the building. He is hesitant to abandon an individual with such exceptional abilities, so he instructs his secretary to arrange a trip for Heyman and to also advise him to conduct. The secretary inquires about the location of their meeting. Sungil designates Inchin as the destination. The HMCS organization has volunteered to assist with the support request, which is now widely known. The sole issue is that they have not yet arrived. The chief is perplexed as to why they are being so disruptive and appears to be weary of the criminals' rivalry. The present report pertains to Sherry Volk, a perilous individual whom they underestimated subsequent to his arrest. However, he gradually deteriorated and lost his sanity following that. This individual effortlessly defeated 5 opponents despite the activation of mana suppression. He is a distinctive criminal who maintains a high profile, and numerous agencies have endured excruciating hardships in an effort to apprehend him. Sherry Volk, the individual in question, is currently seated in his confinement, having been issued a new directive. He discovers that the organization has already initiated its operations. Therefore, in order to permanently exit the cell, he will need to instigate some disturbances within the penitentiary. Our protagonist has recently arrived at the Inshin Awakened Penitentiary to complete his mission. Heyman, on the other hand, is experiencing a temper tantrum as a result of the circumstance that has arisen in the prison. He is extremely irritated that his guildmaster is preoccupied with recruiting and has assigned him an inane mission. Heyman hustles to catch up to him as quickly as possible after spotting a vehicle in the vicinity. He is dissatisfied with the mission and wishes to request overtime pay for the inconvenience his guild commander has caused him. In the meantime, Siwoo is observed relaxing in the conveyance vehicle adjacent to the primary target. Sherry attempts to engage in provocative play with him and inquires as to whether this individual is truly the new warden. No, Siwoo categorically refutes these assertions. Sherry ridicules him for his excessive confidence in his abilities as a unique guild member. The most amusing aspect is that Siwoo turns to him and says, "I don't even know who you are," like he's Thanos or something. Sherry is underwhelmed and almost feels offended that this individual is oblivious of the situation or the reason for his transportation. Siwoo humiliates him by inquiring as to whether they had decided to transport him due to his persistent yapping and refusal to cease. The criminal is at his nadir at this juncture, and he elucidates his lore in the manner of a malevolent Sigma male. He takes pride in having defeated 5 criminals, as if to intimidate the individual seated next to him. Sherry is somewhat taken aback by the guild's ability to dispatch a seemingly ordinary delinquent to pursue a powerful, awakened criminal who is notorious for his unpredictable and lethal nature. However, our guy is simply enjoying his coffee and chilling out, while Sherry informs him that he is completely fucked. At that precise moment, the transit vehicle explodes and is launched into the air. Sherry is furious with him for nearly killing him and violently kicks the door open. The elderly man was able to ascertain that he would not succumb to such a deception and subsequently ridiculed him for being restrained. In addition, they are interested in learning whether he was able to effectively communicate with the officer who was situated adjacent to him. Sherry asserts with assurance that he obliterated his temple, which implies that Siwoo is effectively deceased after consuming his final cup of coffee. Sherry is displeased with the delayed unlocking of his shackles, which are merely a result of their mana reinforcement. Fortunately, they are able to liberate him. The child is under the impression that he is exaggerating significantly. The conversation comes to a complete halt when a single voice enters the scene, urging them to remain silent. This is Heyman, and he is shocked that they were able to execute such a significant maneuver. Heyman is now even more certain that he was correct, that he is not special, and that his guildmaster is incorrect after witnessing Siwoo succumb to the wrath of these low-life criminals. However, he is not in the mindset to relinquish these criminals. When the girl abruptly recognizes him as the A-rank hunter Heyman from the White Lion Guild, he queries their methods and objectives. She is taken aback by the fact that they were pursued. The elderly man affirms that no one else is in the vicinity, indicating that Heyman is prepared to engage in a solo battle. He assumes his position and once more inquires about Sherry's identity. The criminal, who is maniacal, asserts that there is no purpose in introducing himself, as he intends to eliminate the hunter. Subsequently, he executes the Beowulf talent, subsuming a beastly form. Heyman is astounded to discover that he is confronted with a heteromorphic awakener. Sherry activates Diamond Rampage as an additional skill to envelop his body in extraordinary mana, channeling all of his inner fury. He is now operating at an entirely different level. Nevertheless, the beast is forced to defend itself when Heyman commences to strike him with lightning-fast speed. Simultaneously, the hunter is concerned that none of his attacks appear to be decisive enough to deliver a critical blow. The beast regards these strikes as a collection of massage services. The elderly man advises the child to participate in the conflict and conclude it, as they cannot afford to wait for reinforcements to arrive. The girl imbues her hands with vitality, casting a potent spell. This is referred to as the 10-headed viper, and Heyman is confronted with it as well. He mocks the serpent as he evades it. Nevertheless, his remarks are directed against him, as the snakes employ a tracking ability to restrain his body. Heyman is now confined to a single location, which allows the beast to capitalize on its opportunity to strike him with a powerful attack and knock him to the ground. Sherry disapproves of the hunter's conviction that he was exceptional due to his privilege and upbringing by a potent child. In actuality, he does not perceive Heyman as a threat to the alley fights. Heyman reminds them that they are engaging in idle conversation while jumping him in a 3-on-1 situation. However, Sherry also dismisses him, asserting that their group is simply more intelligent than Haman. The old man urges the beast to prepare his final attack, advising them not to squander any more precious time. He gazes down at Haman, contemplating whether he has any final words for himself. Haman comprehends that he is entirely outmatched and may be staring at his own demise. That is, until a single individual arrives and defies the circumstances, thereby saving him. He is slightly irritated that Haman elected to forfeit the combat in such a manner. Siwoo is dissatisfied with the teachings of his disciple. Siwoo is currently experiencing greater difficulty with the logistics of his body cam than with the prospect of a 3-on-1 confrontation. The beast is incredulous that Siwoo survived, as he had previously verified that he had smashed the human skull before exiting the vehicle. The elderly man affirms that he should have expired. Therefore, this is an unusual occurrence to observe. Haman's bellow serves as a warning to Siwoo, advising him to remain patient until assistance arrives. Nevertheless, Siwoo is exceedingly displeased with the fact that he was placed in the vicinity of a crowded shithole. Additionally, his tranquil coffee was disrupted. Therefore, in order to exact a heavy price, he has resolved to regard them all as criminals and eradicate them immediately. The three buffoons are informed by Min Siwoo, also known as the Mad Dog and our Demon Lord Slayer, that their game is over. He addresses Chu Haman from the White Lion Guild, alluding to him as Xiao Long's disciple, and emphasizes that Asura is not merely a skill intended for striking. The heteromorphic hunter, Grey Wolf of Bestia, charges at our hero as he gathers his power. Nevertheless, the Asura talent penetrates the werewolf before it can deliver a strike. Chu Haman, who is closely observing, is unable to trust his eyes as he recognizes the skill as the same one that his master employs. Siwoo promptly follows up, mocking the wolf by remarking that tender meat necessitates draining all the blood. The wolf is knocked aside. The elderly imbecile responds with a thunderwall strike, only to be taken aback as their adversary effortlessly evades the attack. The old man's capacity to double cast with a cursed tool is acknowledged by our hero, who observes that his life has not been wholly squandered. The predator, which he refers to as a parasite, is intrigued by the skill and inquires whether it can be consumed. Siwoo elucidates that the skill is analogous to an expensive, one-time use scroll, necessitating the channeling of mana to activate it. Chu Haman, unable to suppress his curiosity, inquires about the identity of our hero and the manner in which he has acquired knowledge of his master's skill. The old man begins chanting dark rituals, catching him off guard with a gravity spell and attempting to use him as bargaining leverage before he can press further. Siwoo immediately recognizes the old geezer's ruse and demeans the endeavor, mocking him for resorting to empty threats. The elderly man reiterates his demand, asserting that Siwoo must depart if he wishes to preserve Haman's life. He further elaborates that our protagonist was merely coerced into this predicament and that he can depart without causing any disruptions, thereby enabling the situation to proceed effortlessly. Min Siwoo nonchalantly swishes a finger in his ear, dismissing the old man's words by emphasizing that he would not be present if he had not intentionally accepted such a filthy mission. He also mentions that Haman should have no difficulty managing a basic gravity spell such as this, despite the fact that it may not appear to be the case at the present. The elderly man challenges our protagonist, highlighting the evident contradiction and questioning whether he and Haman are truly aligned. Siwoo replies by emphasizing that they are the sole individuals who are aligning with them. He subsequently discloses what he already knows, disclosing that the elderly man is a hunter-killer who operates under the direction of a powerful organization. The elderly gentleman is taken aback by this revelation, which leaves him in awe of the extent of Siwoo's previous knowledge. Siwoo continues to provide additional information about himself without pause, and he eventually demands to know for whom he is working. The elderly man makes another attempt to intimidate our protagonist, noting that Siwoo continued to remain in this location despite being aware that they were hunter-killers. Siwoo simply reiterates his inquiry, directing a deathly gaze at him. The old man eagerly draws a cursed tool and unleashes a shockwave incantation as our hero approaches, only to be taken aback when it is effortlessly nullified. He is perplexed and wonders whether Siwoo employed a lightning-based spell to overload the instrument. He leaps backward without hesitation, attempting to increase the distance between them. The entree is now even more enticing, according to the predator. Suddenly, Siwoo's hand begins to glow, indicating that his form has been restored by 40%. He continues to grow stronger and abuses the elderly man, urging him to cease squandering his time as he is unable to afford to waste the few days he has left. The elderly individual declines to oblige. Siwoo acknowledges that he has revealed his identity as a hunter-killer. However, he emphasizes that the organization he represents will continue to be shrouded in mystery. He elaborates that individuals employed by them are required to adhere to a confidentiality oath. The instant he breaches it and discloses their secrets, he will be immediately executed, guaranteeing his death in either scenario. In the interim, Haemin raises to his feet, recuperating from the gravity spell's effects, at the same time that the werewolf regains his awareness and coughs up black blood. Our hero swiftly advances toward the elderly individual, inquiring as to whether he is apprehensive about death. He initiates the casting of a spell as he speaks, and 3 magic circles emerge around him. The elderly man, who is experiencing increasing anxiety, urgently implores the Grey Wolf of Bestia to take action to prevent Siwoo. Before engulfing himself in a purple aura and charging toward our hero, the werewolf snaps at the old geezer, instructing him to shut up. This time he vows to tear him apart. Nevertheless, Haemin intercepts him before he can travel a significant distance, remarking that their numbers are now even. The two engage in a heated argument, but it is abruptly terminated when our hero erupts with his Thousand Winds enchantment, which drives both the werewolf and the elderly man away. Siwoo rushes toward the elderly man without delay, securing him by the neck with an iron grip and inquiring as to whether he genuinely comprehends the sensation of death. Siwoo demands to know how many times he must drag the elderly man to the verge of death before receiving an answer, tightening his grip around his throat. Haemin observes from a distance and finds it absurd that our hero continues to drive these buffoons to the brink of death, only to subsequently heal them. He considers that he would prefer to perish than endure such a fate if he were in their position. He is even perplexed as to how an individual can possess a healing incantation that is so potent. Siwoo reiterates his inquiry, and the wolf this time implores the elderly man to relent and provide a straightforward response. The old geezer finally yields to the duress and discloses that they are employed by Bestia. He comes to the realization as he examines our hero more closely. Siwoo is the notorious mad dog, Min Siwoo, one of the 3 legendary figures who vanished long ago. Siwoo casually settles down, remarking that he will require additional information now that they have finally resolved to speak. Taking out an image of the man with serpent eyes and fangs who was responsible for Minjin's demise, he demands to know the identity of the perpetrator. As the scenario changes, the assassination organization Bestia is revealed in brief glimpses. A figure known as Crow commanded an elite company that specialized in hunting down targets. The organization's power and influence in the world increased as it expanded over time. One day, the elderly man, who had been a member of the first generation of hunters, received an invitation from them. He did not hesitate to accept the offer swiftly. The organization placed the utmost priority on secrecy for those who were recruited. Even at that time, the elderly man was obligated to swear the oath of silence, despite his advanced age. He relinquished control over his own life and death to the assassination organization by signing it. The old man contemplates his 15-year relationship with Bestia as the scene transitions back, recalling his unwavering conviction that he would never betray them. He had resolved to bite off his tongue and die rather than violate his oath if the situation ever demanded it. However, his resolve was ultimately shattered as a result of the repeated agony of death, which compelled him to eventually yield and speak. The elderly man eventually discloses that the individual in question is also a member of his organization, which is referred to as Black Mamba. The name is somewhat disagreeable to our hero, but he promptly transitions to his primary inquiry. He inquires of both individuals whether they have ever been implicated in the assassination of a hunter named Yang Minjin. And disquieting force overtakes them when neither of them responds, enveloping them in an overwhelming sensation as if their very skin is about to be peeled off. Baldi promptly asserts that they are unaware of the situation. He clarifies that Bestia's operations are primarily autonomous, and members rarely require one another's assistance. Siwoo voluntarily continues before he can press further, disclosing that members typically remain unaware of each other's abilities or locations. Nevertheless, they were specifically designated to retrieve the wolf from prison in light of the organization's biannual meeting. Furthermore, he reveals that the meeting is slated to occur in a week, and that their instructions were to transport the wolf to the location. The elderly man recognizes that their chapter has concluded and prostrates before Siwoo, promising to disclose all of his knowledge, including the method for infiltrating the meeting. He humbly asks our hero to embrace them as his subordinates, driven by desperation. Chu Heyman becomes agitated and denounces the proposal as preposterous. He addresses Siwoo as his sibling and inquires whether he would truly be deceived by such a ruse. Our protagonist remains composed as he contemplates the precise moment when Heyman became his sibling, resting his head on his hand. Heyman contends that Siwoo is at least his senior, and possibly even his mentor's mentor, due to his ability to utilize Asura. He sincerely asks Siwoo to accept him as his disciple, avoiding the discussion of the buffoons. Heyman is unexpectedly interrupted by Siwoo, who instructs him to refrain from speaking for a brief period. He pauses to evaluate the circumstances. His sole objective is to acquire information regarding the snake-eyed individual, Black Mamba. He recognizes that their organization is likely to eliminate them if he permits them to depart. Furthermore, the situation will be significantly exacerbated by the dissemination of information regarding him to Bestia. He ultimately determines to accept them both as his subordinates, after evaluating the advantages and disadvantages. The old geezer is overjoyed and expresses his gratitude, while Heyman is completely shocked by this decision. Nevertheless, they are promptly confronted with a condition before he can lavish Siwoo with praise. Siwoo clearly outlines his condition, stating that in order to guarantee their loyalty, they must swear the ultimate oath, the Mana Oath. The wolf promptly lodges a complaint as the weight of this demand becomes apparent. Nevertheless, the elderly man interrupts him before he can continue to protest, advising him to concur unless he desires to endure death on a dozen additional occasions. The two reluctantly gather their mana at their cores as fear settles in. They state their names in accordance with the directive of our hero. The wolf identifies himself as Sherry Volk, while the elderly gentleman introduces himself as Red Ghost. As the two finalize the agreement with our hero, he guarantees them that their lives will be protected, and they will be rewarded for their loyalty. Heyman, who was left out while the criminals were taken in, protests by flailing on the ground like a child as he watches Siwoo embrace them. He threatens to report everything to the association if he has not made Siwoo his disciple. Pouting, Siwoo fixes him with a bloody gaze before casually informing him that he was merely teasing. He then causes the scroll used for the oath to vanish, thereby fulfilling Heyman's request and accepting him as his disciple. He breathes a murmur of relief and concludes that the presence of additional personnel will prove advantageous. This group should be sufficient to generate the desired atmosphere. However, he acknowledges that an additional individual may be required, someone he intends to employ to clear up the mess that will ensue. A fat, chubby officer is observed reprimanding the squad leader of HMCS, Jong-gu, at the Hunter's police station, demanding an explanation for how Sherry Volk was able to escape. The man's danger is underscored, and he proceeds to contend that the hysteria encircling HMCS is nothing more than a myth. Siwoo, who is currently reclining on a settee, casually replies that Sherry was moving at such a rapid pace that he was unable to keep up. Jong-gu, visibly repulsed, glares at him and demands that he at least exert some effort in his explanation and treat the situation with the utmost gravity. The officer, who is rotund, persists in his outburst, demanding to know why the new transport officer has not yet arrived and describing the entire operation as a chaos. Jong-gu eventually speaks up after hearing enough, stating that a standard prisoner transport team consists of 4 to 5 officers, while the transportation of a high-threat inmate necessitates up to 10. He acknowledges that he specifically requested that only 1 officer manage the transport, thereby acknowledging his own fault. The chubby warden shoots up from his seat in wrath, insisting that none of that matters since the prisoner still managed to escape. Jong-gu, signaling him off, observes that the new transport officer was able to compel the escapee to confess. He discloses that they discovered that Sherry Volk had been receiving assistance from high-ranking prison officers in exchange for bribes. The fat warden dismisses the narrative as an apparent fabrication, refusing to accept it. Jong-gu maintains his composure and concedes that the warden's skepticism is comprehensible. However, he maintains that the situation is severe enough to necessitate an urgent investigation. Jong-gu, who is representing HMCS, has announced that they intend to conduct a comprehensive investigation into the escapee and Incheon prison. He subsequently requests the warden's assistance in this matter. Jong-gu informs Siwoo that he has initiated the investigation and addressed the other matters as requested as the scenario changes. The 2 buffoons, who are now Woo's disciples, and Hunter Chu Heyman are in attendance at the discussion. Siwoo informs the group that the time has come to commence their operation, an infiltration of Bestia's meeting, by presenting his plan on the table. He discloses that approximately 8 of the most prominent awakened murderers will be in attendance. He then instructs Haemon and Jong-gu to pay close attention as the two defectors provide the remaining details. Jong-gu, who is perplexed by the plan, inquires about the method by which they intend to infiltrate an entire assassination group with such a small team. He inquires as to the ultimate objective of their undertaking such a perilous endeavor. Saiwoo smirks and explains that the objective is straightforward: to eliminate each and every one of them. The leader of the upcoming Bestia gathering makes a mocking jest about the two individuals who disappeared. The group contends that they were aware of the elderly man and Sherry Volk's cowardice, but they were unaware of their betrayal. Hedgehog, the goth girl, with a fervor, vows to kill Volk for violating her agreement to go on a date. Skarmith demands silence, asserting that only the supervisor is responsible for punishing traitors. However, the supervisor chuckles in amusement at the rapidity with which the three members vanished. The room is immediately silenced by his presence, and he proceeds to declare a death match, in which the victorious party will be granted the authority to execute the traitors. A prolonged period of silence ensues. Black Mamba bluntly informs the supervisor that his jokes are not amusing. He emphasizes that eliminating disloyal is effortless. The genuine problem is that the location of their rendezvous has been disclosed. One of the members chuckles at the notion that anyone would be so bold as to attempt an attack, but the alarms sound before the words have had time to register. The leader appears to relish the disorder, despite the fact that the group is taken aback. It has been discovered that a single intruder is attempting to enter through each of the 5 entrances. 5 members depart to intercept, while one member makes a remark to Hedgehog and Black Mamba, inquiring as to why they are still lingering with the supervisor. The intruders are ridiculed by Black Mamba, who dismisses them as garbage, while Hedgehog is absorbed in her comics. Despite the fact that our boy Jong-gu is creeping through the vents, the three continue their casual interchange, unaware that his every movement is laced with unease. He silently laments the most hazardous task of the group as frustration rises up within him. The squad gathers outside the meeting location, listening as the old man lays out the situation, having shifted time by half an hour. The 5 entrances are perpetually in flux, resembling a jigsaw puzzle. One of them will be the first to enter, but ultimately, they will all reach the destination. In order to prevent the Bestia members from escaping, our hero determines that they should each enter separately. He instructs Jong-gu to distribute the communicators without hesitation, emphasizing that individuals who encounter difficulty against their opponent, particularly Black Mamba, should pause and request assistance. Upon entering, Jong-gu is confronted with an impasse. He immediately leaps into the conduit above, bypassing all of the organization's security measures without hesitation. However, he is abruptly transported to the Chamber of Murderers. There is no time to solicit additional personnel, as 5 members have already departed. In an effort to reduce their number, he retrieves a handful of marbles from his pocket and nonchalantly releases one. The leader scoffs, turning to Hedgehog with a sneer, and joking that she must have lost it from their slot machine. The goth girl jokingly remarks that she has just struck the jackpot as she picks it up. Additionally, she is correct. The marble explodes like dynamite, causing shockwaves to reverberate throughout the chamber. Her demise is met with a snicker from the leader, who remains unaffected. The incoming projectile is immediately identified by Black Mamba, who immediately rises from his seat. He effortlessly flicks it directly toward the vent, sending it back with precision. Since there is no longer any reason to remain concealed, Jong-gu emerges from his concealment place and makes a grand entrance. He curses himself for being able to take down only one, still astonished at how Black Mamba casually slapped away the grenade like it was nothing, as he is dripping with perspiration. There is no unique technique, only physical prowess is required. Snake Man faces palms, enraged by the traitors who sold them out to HMCS. Upon receiving confirmation, Jong-gu is compelled to sigh, almost feeling pity for the naive individuals who betrayed Bestia for such a pitiful agreement. Jong-gu promptly summons a brilliant flash of light, which temporarily blinds his opponent as he launches daggers that are concealed within the flash. As the leader sips her tea across the room, she relishes it in the manner of a child's conflict. In contrast, Black Mamba, who is already acquainted with Jong-gu's deceptions, chuckles. However, the sight of the Serpent Man's body reassembling itself has left Jong-gu in awe, as raw mana powers his irrational regeneration with ease. The snake terminates playtime by charging forward and striking our child with a forceful blow against the wall. Mamba sighs in frustration, as he felt that he had struck the vitals too early. He inquires of the supervisor whether it would be possible to complete the task in a state of disarray. However, our boy reacts promptly, utilizing his radio to provide a report prior to being struck in the torso. The Serpent Man inquires whether the backup is the HMCS, Traders, or Wolf Boy by stomping on his chest. However, Junggu is unable to respond as the response is abruptly delivered from behind. The actual fight commences as the trio simultaneously invades the meeting hall, catching everyone off guard. Mamba effortlessly evades the trio's assault, leaving nothing but a crater in his wake without even glancing back. The intruders are observed by the snake guy, who murmurs about the disappointment that the boss must feel at the weakness of her selected ones. However, there is something that does not set well with him. He observes that the trio appears nearly unharmed, and their movements are unusually fluid for individuals who were purportedly engaged in combat with Tiger and Grizzly. Their gradual assaults are effortlessly circumvented, which induces uncertainty in his mind. Heyman advances to engage Mamba in close combat. However, Mamba seizes him in a lethal embrace before he can deliver a blow. He chuckles as he tosses him away and inquires about the activities of a white hunter with the HMCS. Snake Man's suspicions increase as he observes the trio's struggle. It is impossible for a team that was assembled only a day ago to have inflicted such a severe blow on Bestia. His eyes narrow as he contemplates the individual who is truly controlling the situation. Heyman is enraged and commands Junggu to stand up, reminding him that they hurried in as soon as they could. He elucidates that Siwoo abruptly appeared during their altercation and directed them to the hall. The trio continues to delay, purchasing time until our hero arrives to complete the task, as they have no other option. Folk is perplexed as to how they are supposed to capture a creature such as Black Mamba alive. He grinds his teeth. The elderly man observes that the hall is rigged, emphasizing that teleportation is not one of Mamba's tactics, despite his extraordinary speed. He experiences an increasing sense of disquiet as he observes the leader silently observing the battle. The actual threat is posed by Crow. Anything could transpire once the commander initiates an action. In light of this, the elderly man advises them to concentrate on capturing Mamba while he supervises the leader. In the interim, Snake Guy becomes increasingly agitated as he navigates Heyman and Wolf Boy's unrelenting assaults. His frustration is exacerbated by the fact that his inquiry is consistently disregarded by all parties. Baldy's voice abruptly resonates throughout the hall, announcing that no one will depart until our hero arrives. Heyman and Crow, the leader of Bestia, are both captured by red mana chains that emerge from the earth. The elderly man's endeavors are dismissed as a waste of time by the boss, who chuckles. However, the elderly man remains unperturbed, with complete assurance in his binding incantation. A perilous aura emanates from Crow as he contemplates the extent of their mastermind's power in order to betray him with such brazenness. He summons Hedgehog without hesitation. She launches herself at the elderly man with her angular hair, emerging from the shadows. Folk and Junggu rush to his defense, astounded by her continued existence. Mamba, impatient with the delay, activates his talent and shatters the binding skill, stating that they will be occupied with the task of cleaning up the mess. Mamba's scales alter to white, transforming him into a white-scaled reptile man as he pledges to swiftly terminate their existence. Junggu and Heyman, aware that no attack will penetrate the dense scales, prepare to flee for their lives. Junggu contemplates Mamba's transformation, which appears to be comparable to that of Wolf Boy. The prana is denser than diamond. He is the only individual who can hold out against the prescription for disaster in the rigged meeting hall. He determines that it is impossible to provide assistance to Volk and the elderly man in their battle against the hedgehog. He throws a dagger into Mamba's arm, providing assistance in the only manner the weak individual can. It turns green before the lizard man can extract it, suggesting that it possesses a corrosion skill. Junggu continues to fire a barrage of daggers before being carried away by the wind. Heyman cautions him about the airborne boulder that is approaching him, but Mamba promptly reminds him not to turn his back during a confrontation. The monster teleports behind Junggu, cautioning that the situation has been gravely misunderstood by innocent hunters. In a dirty battle, skill ranks and mana numbers are of no consequence, as the lizard man emphasizes with a firm chokehold. He deems it an error to confront them on their own territory. In the interim, our hedgehog is occupied with exacting retribution against the Volk, who is deceitful. The Bestia members are provided with a variety of self-destructing and buffing mechanisms in the meeting hall. It is unsurprising that they refer to it as the Snake's Den. No one who enters will ever emerge alive. Mamba nearly knocks our boy out when he suddenly detects an ominous aura, telling Junggu to give up his frivolous effort. Crow immediately springs backward as our hero flies by his friend Junggu and slams the unattractive lizard into the den's wall. After successfully identifying Minjin's assassin, our Demon Lord Slayer exhibits a demon-like grin. In the interim, Hedgehog has already eliminated the Wolfman and is now concentrating on Siwoo. Her curiosity piqued as she endeavors to ascertain his true identity. Nevertheless, a magic circle abruptly activates, incapacitating her in an instant before she can take any action. Crow, the group's commander, is intrigued by the unexpected turn of events and is curious as to how Siwoo was able to dismantle and repurpose each magic circle that was embedded within the space. Predator Frey, who is unseen and unheard by all but Siwoo, seizes the opportunity to gloat, asserting that his power was the sole reason for this accomplishment. Crow observes the scene with mirth, commenting on the effortless manner in which Siwoo has reduced a billion-dollar facility to nothing more than scrap. In the interim, Black Mamba recuperates from his injury and promptly casts a spell, only for Siwoo to elude it by leaping backward. Black Mamba begins to reconstruct the situation, querying whether Siwoo is responsible for eliminating the old geezer and the wolf guy, as well as orchestrating the entire operation upon recognizing the situation. Siwoo continues to harbor the rage that overtook him upon learning of his subordinate's death, and he continues to direct his accusations toward Black Mamba as the true perpetrator. Crow, who is observing the situation from a distance, inquires as to what Mamba could have done to incite such anger. Black Mamba, unperturbed, maintains that he solely executes the orders and requests that have been assigned to him, and that he is not responsible for any additional actions. He continues to express his curiosity, attempting to verify his suspicion by inquiring whether Siwoo has arrived in search of retribution. He is perplexed as to how Siwoo was able to ascertain his identity, as he never leaves any traces. Siwoo's intention to exact his revenge is evident in the form of a thunder circle he generates in his hand. However, there is an issue that he must first disclose. In the interim, Crow is confined by the others. She raises her hands and directs her inquiry toward her former crew members, inquiring as to what could have taken place to transform them into Siwoo's obedient followers so abruptly. The thunder circle that Siwoo has been casting eventually reaches completion as this unfolds, revealing that he has successfully reversed buff-enhancing magic into traps. Black Mamba, who is currently grappling with the suppressing snare, is attempting to ascertain whether Siwoo is a melee hunter or a tracking-type magic user by attempting to piece together his abilities. However, none of the alternatives he contemplates appears to be entirely consistent with the events he has observed. Siwoo launches another skill, causing him to collide with the wall once more and compel him to revert to his hunter form before he has the opportunity to contemplate the matter further. Black Mamba, who is bleeding from his jaw, asserts that he has never previously encountered Siwoo. Despite his pride in his comprehensive knowledge of high-ranking hunters, he is at a loss as to the identity of his opponent. He immediately conjures another magic circle and inquires about Siwoo's business relationship with him. Siwoo abruptly emerges from above Black Mamba, causing him to fall to the ground with his foot before he can complete his incantation. He asserts his authority over the situation by pressing down harder, emphasizing that he will be the one to pose the questions, not the other way around. Siwoo strikes him once more without allowing him to recuperate, issuing a stern warning that a single misstep will result in his death, thereby eliminating any possibility of defiance. The will to resist is broken, and Black Mamba, who is now completely overpowered, visibly surrenders and implores Siwoo to cease. Siwoo promptly demands to know who ordered the assassination of Yang Minjin upon observing that Black Mamba is finally willing to engage in conversation. Black Mamba's mind is preoccupied with the possibility of whether Siwoo has any connection to the victim and how he acquired knowledge of the murder. This is exacerbated by the fact that perspiration is dripping down his face. He employs a cheap trick, feigning compliance for a brief period in order to lower Siwoo's defense, rather than responding. He seizes the opportunity and abruptly emits a venomous poison from his mouth, intending to appoint his adversary. Black Mamba asserts that a genuine assassin never discloses his client, as he is convinced that he has defeated Siwoo. Nevertheless, his assurance is shattered when Siwoo miraculously recovers, self-healing without any effort. He is overcome by panic as he endeavors to comprehend whether Siwoo is truly a physician. He is in a state of absolute despair when he turns to Crow for assistance, only to discover that she is entirely encircled by Siwoo's disciples, leaving him with no escape route. Eventually, Black Mamba concedes and begins to disclose the client's name, Panday, as there are no other alternatives. However, Crow promptly eliminates him before he can complete the task. Siwoo ponders whether the name he was about to utter was pandemonium as he observes this transpire. Crow eventually admits that she has come to the realization that Siwoo is the legendary first-generation hunter, Mad Dog, who mysteriously vanished a decade ago. Upon hearing this, Siwoo is now focusing on Crow and is inquiring as to whether she is also associated with pandemonium. Nevertheless, she categorically refutes the charge, claiming that her organization is exclusively an assassin's guild and does not entertain personal requests. Siwoo's deathly gaze pierces Crow, emphasizing that the sole viable course of action is to disclose the truth if she is aware of her own well-being. Crow maintains her posture, asserting that she has no reason to lie, citing that Siwoo already has information on her. She instructs Hedgehog to rise and aid in their escape with a simple snap of her fingertips. The two vanish into the sky in an instant, preparing to depart. Crow inquires as to whether Siwoo intends to pursue her before departing. However, he discounts the notion, asserting that he has already acquired the lead he was seeking, rendering him without any additional justification for pursuing them. Crow bids adieu to Siwoo as the portal materializes, suggesting that their paths may intersect in the near future before dissipating into thin air. Jonggu, enraged, complains to Siwoo about allowing them to escape, only to be met with a composed response. Siwoo informs him that Crow would have activated the floor's self-destruction sequence if he had pursued them, a situation they were unable to evade. He then directs Jonggu to supervise the cleansing, asserting that they have accomplished sufficient tasks for the day. Siwoo is in his chamber, conducting an inquiry regarding pandemonium as the scene transitions. His mind wanders back 20 years to the instant when the first gate appeared, unleashing a variety of phenomena upon the world. Magic stones emerged, mana surged into existence, and numerous rare resources were discovered. Demons also emerged through the gate, initially assimilating into society without being noticed. Nevertheless, they did not cease their efforts at that point. They not only seized control of the gates, but they also regarded humans as an inferior species. Before long, they had effectively established their headquarters by constructing the Demon King's castle at the center of the continent, thereby securing their control over the resources that were pouring out of the gates. A faction of humans emerged in the midst of this chaos, pledging allegiance to the Demon King. They were referred to as Pandemonium, as they acted as a conduit between humans and demons. Nevertheless, the first generation of hunters emerged to oppose them, and fortune favored humanity. These hunters rapidly acquired the ability to manipulate mana, serving as the final line of defense against the expanding influence of Pandemonium. The world was shaken by the brutal conflict that ensued, the great war between humans and demons. In the end, humanity emerged victorious, repelling the demons. Siwoo remembers that it has been 10 years since he defeated the 4 demon masters alone, only to be trapped in the demon world by a dimensional rift. He is perplexed as to why the term pandemonium is resurfacing after such a lengthy period, particularly given that the organization was disbanded prior to the commencement of the conflict. His thoughts shift to his predator, as he attempts to ascertain the reason for the apparent disparity between the demons in the other world. Frey recognizes the distinction and provides his own analysis, which demonstrates the existence of numerous races across the dimensions. He observes that the demons in the other world were particularly merciless, having even exploited the dragon species and compelled them to serve. Frey persists in his assertion that demons exhibit criminal behavior regardless of their location. He had no memories prior to becoming a member of our hero. He only had a persistent sensation that the demons had taken something from him. He is now certain that the demons who tampered with his memory were the ones who spent over 100 years at Siwoo's side analyzing demons. Siwoo places a hand on his head, reflecting that he should have prioritized the discovery of their true nature rather than exclusively concentrating on their destruction. Siwoo observes that the mana patterns of demons are distinct from those of humans, and they have become significantly more adept at merging in compared to 10 years in the past. Frey proposes that eliminating them would resolve all issues. However, Siwoo acknowledges that he desires that it were that straightforward. Immediately, his younger sibling enters, inquiring as to why he had abruptly requested to rent an office and suspecting that he may have gotten himself into trouble. Siwoo maintains a casual demeanor, asserting that the matter is not of consequence. He is merely endeavoring to locate Minjin's whereabouts. Sejun notes that, according to his information, Siwoo recently eliminated an entire assassination organization. He queries whether his request for an office was intended to facilitate the planning of that mission. Sejun admonishes him as he sits on the sofa, reminding him that he has consistently advised him to maintain a low profile. He cautions that it would not be optimal if the president were to discover the situation. Siwoo, releasing a sigh, assures his sibling that there is no need for concern, as Jeonggu has already eliminated all evidence of his involvement. Siwoo also indicates that he intends to visit President Choi Dae-soo in the near future. However, his sibling regards this as an unwise decision. Siwoo's actions frustrate Guildmaster Sejun, who contends that he has not yet regained his full mana strength. Although he will not compel him to cease, he maintains that he should not proceed with haste. He conveys apprehension that Siwoo may find himself in trouble once more, reminding him that the world has undergone substantial changes in the past decade. Siwoo appears before his sibling, instructing him not to exert excessive pressure on his diminutive intellect by scratching his head in a manner reminiscent of a monkey. Sejun relinquishes the matter, emphasizing the importance of Siwoo's adherence to his commitment and safety, as he is unable to risk losing him once more. He shifts the focus and inquires whether Siwoo recalls Hunter Shinji-soo, noting that her awakening skill was quite impressive. He recommends that his sibling investigate her. Siwoo, on the other hand, abruptly alters the subject, expressing his hunger and extending an invitation to Sejun to join him for supper. Frey also joins in, lamenting that he is famished due to Siwoo's insufficient mana. Siwoo responds by mockingly attributing his appetite to his predator. Sejun calls Jeonggu as he departs, expressing his dissatisfaction with his sibling for disclosing all of the information. Nevertheless, the larger individual reprimands him, reminding him of the pandemonium he caused in an attempt to conceal his actions in the presence of HMCS. The organization is being inundated with interviews from every media outlet and agency following the dismantling of the assassins. He also informs Siwoo that the branch manager is now closely monitoring them as a result of his decision to exclude his name from the matter. Siwoo contends that this is advantageous because it indicates that he is achieving results. However, Jeonggu, who is evidently incensed, laments that the genuine problem is determining how to rationalize the fact that he single-handedly eliminated such high-ranking A+ hunters. Our hero argues that Jeonggu should have consulted the White Lion Guild in light of Haemon's presence. However, Jeonggu continues to maintain that Siwoo's involvement would alleviate their burden. Siwoo then terminates the conversation by asserting that his meal is prepared and disregarding the issue. On his way to the kitchen, he reclines on the settee, contemplating the extent of his job satisfaction. After reversing his gaze, he casually inquires of his sibling whether there have been any recent developments concerning the demons. The demons were compelled to propose a peace treaty and establish an institute in the polar continent to study the mana that manifested on Earth after Siwoo eliminated the 4 demon lords, as Sejun explains. He also mentions that certain nations have begun to collaborate with them on this research, and it has become increasingly uncommon to observe demons outside of the polar continent. People have largely disregarded the pandemonium they once caused, reducing it to nothing more than an urban legend, as time has passed. Frey finds it rather absurd, and wonders when demons ever evolved into peace-loving creatures. Siwoo then redirects the discourse to Crow, noting that her mana pattern bore a striking resemblance to that of a demon, but there was an anomaly. This prompts him to suspect that she may be a demon-human hybrid. He is persuaded that such a possibility exists, as demons first appeared on Earth 20 years ago. A mission that was initially initiated to avenge Minjin's death has since evolved into a much more intricate endeavor, leaving him with the impression that this pursuit may persist for an extended period. Upon his return to his residence, Siwoo commences the process of instructing his 2 new subordinates on how to manage their mana by assisting them in identifying their mana core. Hamin is perplexed as to how this could be beneficial, as skills are only activated during high adrenaline conflicts. Wolfboy is reminded that they were the ones who requested training in the first place, and Siwoo strikes him in frustration. He sighs at their naive conviction that the most effective method of utilizing mana is to simply expel it in the same manner as a gym exercise. Bulk, on the other hand, maintains that there is no necessity for control if they can eliminate their adversaries in a single blow. Siwoo emphasizes that the tutorial tower's simplicity has resulted in an excessive dependence on brute force. He elucidates that the precise control necessary to sense one's prana core is evidently lacking in his new disciples. He illustrates that each individual possesses an internal space where mana accumulates, which is frequently referred to as the dantian or essence. Mana is released in a manner that results in the manifestation of talents, and each individual awakens with a distinctive trait. The greater their mastery of the power emanating from their essence, the more potent their capabilities become. For this reason, training is indispensable, as it not only increases their mana reserves, but also improves the efficacy of their abilities. Siwoo mocks the three for only utilizing their authority for approximately 20 years, behaving as an elderly man. He advises them to cease their complaints and adhere to his directives if they genuinely desire to develop their strength. In addition, he cautions them about the rigorous training that the Bestia traders will endure until they have satisfactorily atoned for their actions. Suddenly, Janggu, who is visibly distressed, arrives and demands to know why Siwoo did not answer his phone. The mad dog nonchalantly replies that he does not answer calls non-stop. Janggu disregards the comment and emphasizes the necessity of his urgent meeting with the branch director at headquarters. Siwoo is dubious of Janggu at the HMCS office, questioning whether he has informed his superiors. Janggu vigorously denies the claim. However, two of his sarcastic colleagues approach them before he can elaborate. Janggu's sudden ascent to renown is the subject of teasing by the leader of the Gangnam team and his lieutenant. Janggu clips his tongue upon Changwon's return from his vacation and advises him to cease his laziness and focus on his responsibilities, rather than causing a nuisance to his colleagues. The Gangnam team commander disregards the bickering and directs his attention to Siwoo. However, our hero is uninterested. Rather, he nonchalantly removes his ear, unperturbed. Janggu intervenes, grumbling that the Gangnam turds are spewing drivel due to jet lag. Changwon's assistant responds with a nerdy retort, and Changwon begins to ramble about how his team is making international headlines while the gangbook team is occupied with minor criminals. Siwoo, who is preoccupied with scrolling through his phone, hardly acknowledges the conversation until the nerd firmly reminds him to demonstrate respect and introduce himself to his superiors. Our hero promptly dismisses him and instructs him to vacate the valuable space that his commander is occupying with his fabricated, roided-up muscles. In addition, he observes the aide's spectacles and smirks, inquiring whether Four Eyes is blind despite the edgy frames. The nerd twitches in anger and promptly requests permission to discipline the newbie. However, Janggu, who is always the voice of reason, groans and inquires whether Four Eyes possesses any emotional intelligence. Changwon, who is not prone to allowing things to slip, scoffs and inquires whether Janggu is deaf, as it is evident that he did not hear Siwoo trash-talk his seniors. Janggu, his usual loyal self, vehemently denies the claim, while our protagonist chuckles and suggests that the orc may have an excessive amount of blubber obstructing his ears. That is the final barrier. Changwon, furious, cracks his knuckles and declares in front of the entire office that it is time to teach these thugs a lesson and demonstrate who is truly in control. Immediately thereafter, the supervisor arrives. Jianho, the branch director, appears unexpectedly, causing the Gangnam team to be terrified. He turns to our tandem with a warm smile, greeting them and apologizing for the delay caused by the dimwits, completely ignoring them. Jianho personally escorts his esteemed visitors away without wasting time, even going so far as to inquire about their preferred tea. Changwon endeavors to voice his grievances while fuming. However, the supervisor abruptly interrupts him with a casual reminder of his complete failure in the Japan mission, before he can even speak. That immediately silences the Gangnam turds. The two are left speechless, their minds racing, as they attempt to figure out the type of insane connections this rookie must have, as they are consumed by jealousy. Siwoo, unfazed, goes straight to the point about the reason behind his summons, while Jianguo remains on edge inside the director's office. The director, amused by his directness, responds with a chuckle, redirecting the conversation to the escort at Incheon prison. He emphasizes that the escort case is now under the jurisdiction of their branch as a result of the Bestia raid's success. He immediately addresses the genuine issue at hand, directly querying the events that transpired with the escaped prisoner, all while smiling broadly. His skepticism is apparent, as it is difficult for him to accept that an individual who is capable of defeating the notorious Gert would authentically lose to a mere wolf boy. He promptly instructs Jianguo to withdraw, thereby guaranteeing that their conversation remains confidential, upon observing Siwoo's hesitation to respond. The director reiterates that he regards himself as a rational individual. Despite Jianguo's impressive record, the fact remains that he is unable to independently assault and dismantle an assassin's guild such as Bestia. He concludes that the escaped prisoner likely provided them with a lead to the organization, based on his experience. He emphasizes that it would be beneficial for all parties to disclose this information in a formal manner. Nevertheless, it is not permissible to disregard a desired hunter, particularly if it is demanded by a novice. The director realizes that his line of questioning is unproductive and changes his approach, disclosing that he has extended an invitation to a mutual acquaintance who is eager to engage in a conversation with Siwoo. His inquiry had finally reached its zenith. Siwoo turns his head to confront the guildmaster of fighting warrior, Du Kang-hu, who is one of his fellow first-generation legendary hunters. The two engage in a tranquil discourse over a cup of tea at Kang-hu's residence, reminiscent of the good old days. Uncle Kang-hu recounts his initial astonishment upon learning of our hero's passing. Predator is intrigued and inquires about the identity of the elderly man who appears to be quite familiar with him. Our hero also observes that the man appears to have aged significantly. Kang-ho chuckles in response to the peculiar remark and observes that Siwoo appears to be frozen in time. The uncle mentions that Siwoo has not gained a single wrinkle over the past 10 years, with a hint of jealousy. He subsequently inquires as to what transpired, as his disciples were unable to locate him despite experiencing the depths of purgatory. Our boy responds with a lackadaisical demeanor, stating that they will require an additional beverage due to the length of his narrative. The uncle is astounded by the extent of his experiences after listening to his century-long narrative. Our Demon Kingslayer expresses concern that the fourth boss's combat was abruptly terminated by a mysterious dimensional magic. Kang-ho discloses that the fourth Demon King is still alive, leaving Siwoo in a state of shock, thereby resolving the confusion. He slams the table, consumed by fury at the fact that the humans signed the peace treaty despite being aware of this. Kang-ho endeavors to reassure him by elucidating that the Demon Lord's forces are the only ones that remain. The demons on Earth claim that they were merely adhering to the directives of their commander in the war against humans after the Demon Slayer's reign ended. Siwoo grates his teeth, acknowledging that he had been used as a scapegoat. However, Kang-ho characterizes it as a necessary evil, as human resources had been overextended since the initial gate's appearance. The demons even pledged to impart their expertise on the process of sealing the gateways when they offered the peacefire. It was a proposition that could not be disputed. Consequently, the humans exchanged the Demon King's remnants for a laboratory in the Arctic, which enabled them to safely open a gate. It was unquestionably the most advantageous option for those who were not acquainted with magic and the gates. Consequently, the agreement was accepted by high-ranking individuals from all countries, including Choi Daisu. Since that time, the entities have maintained their anonymity. He mentions that the first generation of hunters were initially highly dubious. However, they dispersed following Siwoo's disappearance. The fascination with demons had diminished after the situation had stabilized. Since that time, Kang-ho has harbored reservations regarding the demons. However, the Mad Dog's disappearance is even more perplexing. Choi Daisu made an effort to eradicate all indications of Siwoo following his disappearance, ensuring that only the second-generation hunters were aware of our demon exterminator. What is even more peculiar is that the uncle was unable to identify him today, despite having fought alongside him on numerous occasions. Our hero speculates that Daisu may have received assistance from the demons after observing the memory loss' unnatural nature. Kang-ho concurs, asserting that Siwoo has been an ongoing source of frustration for both parties. The hero then muses aloud about the benefits that the demons would derive from assisting a self-centered individual like Daisu in the process of erasing his existence. Kang-ho reminds him that the demons have become more difficult to challenge because they have even assisted humans in enhancing their mana. Siwoo responds by emphasizing that these individuals are the same as those who initiated a conflict due to their view that humans are inferior. Following this, Kang-ho recommends that Siwoo convene with his disciples in order to gain a more comprehensive understanding. The issue is that his disciples have dispersed throughout the globe. However, the uncle replies that Yoa is still in Korea despite the fact that children are like that. She is currently the commander of the Azure Flower Guild and holds an S rank. Nevertheless, Uncle Kang-ho is apprehensive about the fact that the same redhead who has always adhered to him like a magnet is now employed by Daisu. Our protagonist dismisses the matter, asserting that everyone has their own justifications. The uncle mentions his younger sibling after they have a good laugh over the expensive yet unpleasant-tasting liquor. Siwoo responds that his younger brother adores the elderly man and expresses gratitude to the samurai uncle for treating Sejun as his own son. At that moment, an infiltrator captures a photograph of the two from the outside and forwards it to his guildmaster. He affirms that he has observed the HMCS privately meeting with the renowned Kang-ho. Yoa, the guildmaster, expresses her gratitude and verifies that Siwoo is alive, as she had anticipated. After witnessing the Empire Guild's unusually tumultuous movements, her suspicions had intensified. The lady, who had been sorely missing her master, collapses to her knees and weeps with relief at the sight of him. Sejun's confidence in her diminished subsequent to her employment with Daesu. Nevertheless, the lady persisted in her quest, even after all others had given up. Yoa prepares to meet the master, who has not changed in the slightest, and peers at him. However, her optimism is dashed when she hears her name being called. Dasu inquires as to why she is in such a hurry. The redhead woman, who is attempting to stabilize her quivering arm, responds that it is nothing extraordinary. The eerie man grasps her shoulder, emphasizing that the cold-hearted woman, who was unaffected by her mother's death, cannot be so moved by something so trivial. He speculates that he has heard of the return of a particular infamous Min Siwoo, and her countenance is frozen, giving it away. The eye-patch uncle sighs as he observes her dash off to her master, behaving as a devoted companion. He clicks his tongue while patting her head, muttering that she has not matured at all. He explicitly states that he does not intend to relinquish her readily, despite the fact that she is his final blood relative. She slaps his hand away, reminding him that she never pledged fealty to him in the first place, and he is aware of this. He acknowledges that he permitted her to remain in the vicinity of his guild solely because she developed into a formidable hunter. Yoa is incensed by his dismissal of her as a mere instrument. The redhead lashes out at her purported uncle, who neglected her at her most vulnerable. Only Siwoo had been present to rescue her from despondency. Daesu undermines her self-assurance by reminding her that she is a criminal. Our hero's alleged joyful reunion will not be as enjoyable as she expected once he discovers her past, as he has been relentlessly pursuing criminals. The eerie uncle cautions her to not forget her impure origins and encourages her to awaken from her illusion. The woman, who is quivering, is left completely demoralized and unable to speak. In the meantime, our hero encounters a pair of novices at the guild, where he has pledged to provide them with direct instruction. Jisoo inquires as to whether the bald elderly man and the huffing bear mask are also accompanying them. The two seniors are introduced by our hero, while the wolf boy is attempting to conceal his identity by suffocating in the bear disguise. The young men are immediately intimidated by the old man's menacing presence, but the baldy nonchalantly mentions that he will be relying on their energy. He provides Jisoo with words of encouragement as if she were his own granddaughter. Sewoo recalls the troublemaking wolf boy, that he is still on probation, and cautions him not to bully the juniors unless he wishes to experience death once more. With that, the team proceeds to the F-rank gate, which is possessed by the Empire Guild. Our hero advises Jisoo to regard the enormous portal as merely another door, as she acknowledges that she is experiencing considerable anxiety. The other recruit, who is also hesitant, refers to a rumor that the gates may consume hunters if they are closed while they are still inside. The elderly man provides them with assurance, asserting that humans are now capable of opening and closing the gates with precision. He continues by elucidating that the precious resources that the creatures within the gates yield have transformed them into a business. Without taking some risks, cowards will not receive any rewards. Upon entering the gate, the crew is greeted by a verdant forest. The recruits begin to complain, which leaves our hero questioning whether all children are this naive, even after they have graduated from the Hunter Academy. Bear Boy clarifies that recruits are ranked upon completion of the tutorial tower and only acquire practical experience upon joining a guild, following the completion of their studies. Siwoo conveys his apprehension, characterizing the F-rank training as little more than a system for the mass production of weaklings. He encourages them to exhibit their abilities prior to confronting creatures. The pretend recruit, who is sent by Sejun, is feeling humiliated as a stranger, is dictating his or her behavior to him, while a female who is unable to effectively utilize her power is also present. When Jisoo finally charges up her skill, she is thrown back by the force of her own attack, landing on her butt. Our trainer instructs her to cease her frequent apologies and distributes a whip. The recruit appears perplexed. However, he clarifies that it will enable her to more effectively manage her distinctive talent. Jisoo attempts to reactivate her incantation by holding the whip. In the interim, the fictitious recruit informs them that a group of goblins is ambushing them. Our trainer instructs him to manage it independently while maintaining a secure distance. The individual condemns Siwoo's smug assertion that they would not learn anything if he defeated the goblins on their behalf. The baldy is astounded by the newbie's flashy tracking skill as he observes him in action. Nevertheless, it is evident that Byung-guk's control is subpar and he is consuming his mana at an alarming rate. In the interim, the recruit is taken aback by the fact that the act of combating a cluster of goblins alone feels like an act of punishment for an individual of his caliber. He shouts at Jisoo in a state of distress, inquiring as to how much longer she will endure. He collapses, completely depleted of mana, and a goblin nearly delivers a fatal strike. Jisoo's skill is unleashed just in time, compelling the goblin to acquiesce. She retreats and replicates her movements with a single command. As they observe a rare domination talent in action, Wolfboy and Baldy are impressed. Even Frey, who is unable to contain his excitement, implores for permission to indulge in the uncommon sight. Nevertheless, the Mad Dog remains unimpressed, stating that it is quite pointless if she can only manage a single antagonist. The newbie, upon recognizing that she is in serious trouble, begins to desperately jolt her unconscious companion while the goblins drool, observing the easy prey before them. Siwoo's assistance has enabled her to gain a better understanding of how to employ her techniques, and she is appreciative of this. Our son is unconcerned with her appearance, as this is the sole form of mentoring he is prepared to provide. She breaks a smile, her hair disheveled, and admits that she was the one who was overconfident, believing that hunters and awakeners were inherently unique and that their value in society increased as they advanced in rank. However, she was now able to detect a glimmer of the genuine actuality. Skills were instruments, not assets that could be employed to establish an individual's value. Siwoo concurs that training is crucial and believes that it suffices to have acquired knowledge. He is exhausted and desires to return to his residence. The elderly man abruptly observes a sizable throng ascending and becomes concerned that these individuals may be affiliated with an alternative guild. The girl clarifies that negotiations are currently underway between the Azure Flower Guild and an additional organization. After all, a new gate has been discovered, and these individuals are merely being transported to this location. Siwoo briefly withdraws upon hearing the guild's name. The guild leader is approached by a group of individuals who are intrigued by the gate's distinctive appearance and the accumulation of hunters' corpses that was discovered within. The peculiar aspect of this case is that the hunters were not even torn apart by creatures. From the outside, their bodies appeared to be intact. However, their organs had sustained the majority of the damage. Yoa was left to ponder the potential catalyst for such an unusual turn of events. A voice draws her over from her shoulder, disrupting her train of thought. Siwoo is the one who confidently welcomes her, assuring her that her teacher has returned. She exhibits an alternative aspect of herself when she observes him in this location, referencing his return. Siwoo desires to converse with her. However, she is preoccupied and has obligations to attend to. Yoa flees the situation, while Frey is present and criticizing our son for being the first to be rejected at the speed of light. Her dismissal of him in that manner is also considered impolite by the elderly man. Siwoo affirms that this is the case. However, it is not due to her recent rudeness. In reality, he observed her in a state of fragility, as if she were weeping, and he is unsure of the reason. Let us delve into their history. Siwoo visited her while she was concealed and weeping uncontrollably. He is unaware of the reason for her distress. The teacher emphasized that he will always locate her, regardless of her efforts to conceal herself. It was discovered that the girl was extremely envious of Sejun's superior training due to his connection to his sibling, while she was merely a nobody he had acquired. She was once on the streets, starving, and he rescued her in the same way that Batman rescues a new Robin each week. Nevertheless, Yoa is perplexed as to why Siwoo has been so benevolent and considerate of her, despite the fact that she has provided him with no good reason. He taunts her with great intensity, asserting that it is merely a decision he has made. He had already been born into a tragic world and believed that it was appropriate to have a devoted family of his own. He also grants Yoa the honor of being referred to as his real sister. The redhead responds by flushing and persisting in her small-scale protest. Siwoo is slightly irritated and contemplates whether it would be more effective to elicit an even more intense lament from her during their subsequent training session. Yoa is opposed to him increasing the level of difficulty of the training, as he already subjected her to the worst conditions on a daily basis. Her mind is consumed by those images. She remembers never aspired to be the most accomplished disciple, but rather someone who could serve as his weapon and upon whom he could depend. And as a result, she developed emotions for him. Your fortune is not favorable. Yoa was unable to escape the confines of her upbringing as the daughter of a despicable criminal. She derives no justification from her childhood privileges, which she relished. This is the reason why Yoa is willing to go to any lengths to defend her teacher, the individual who inspired her to begin anew. Sejun unexpectedly visits Yoa, whom he refers to as his sister out of habit before addressing her appropriately. The redhead requests that he refrain from engaging in conversation for a brief period, as she has arrived to discuss matters. Let us proceed to a brief account of Yoa's life. Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to Yoa's narrative. 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 Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to her own. Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to Yoa's narrative. Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to Yoa's narrative. Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to Yoa's narrative. Yoa's narrative is somewhat comparable to Yoa's narrative.